in the sleepy village of Lymstock, a sinister secret festers. Vile anonymous letters flood the streets, accusing neighbours of shameful lies. When a widow's suicide unveils a chilling murder, pilot Jerry Burton and his sister Joanna unravel a web of deceit. A maid's brutal death, a hidden letter from a dead man, and a shocking betrayal point to a killer hiding in plain sight. As the poison pen strikes again, can they expose the truth before the village tears itself apart? In Sinister, moving finger, no one is what they seem. Chapter 1. Arrival in Lymstock. The train rattled to a halt at Lymstock station, its whistle piercing the drowsy afternoon air. Jerry Burton stepped onto the platform, leaning lightly on his stick, his face taut from the lingering pain of injuries sustained in a plane crash. Beside him, his sister Joanna, her auburn hair catching the sunlight, scanned the quiet village with a mixture of curiosity and mild disdain. London's bustle was far behind them, and Lymstock, with its thatched cottages and winding lanes, seemed a world apart. A place to heal, or so their doctor had insisted. "Rustic charm, Jerry," Joanna remarked, her tone teasing as she hoisted a suitcase. "Do you suppose they've discovered electricity yet?" Jerry managed a wry smile. "Give it a chance, Joe. It's meant to be peaceful. No excitement, no strain. Just what I need." They were met by a taciturn driver from the local garage, who loaded their luggage into a battered Morris and drove them through the village. Lymstock unfolded like a picture postcard. The high street with its half-timbered shops, the church spire rising above ancient yews, and the occasional villager pausing to stare at the newcomers. Jerry felt the weight of their scrutiny, a faint prickle of unease beneath the idyllic surface. Their destination was Little Firs, a Georgian house rented from Mrs. Simington, a widow with 2 young sons and a stepdaughter. The house stood at the edge of the village, its red brick softened by climbing roses. Mrs. Simington greeted them at the door, a pale woman in her late 30s, her manner formal yet distant. Her dark eyes flicked over Jerry's stick, and she murmured something about hoping they'd find the house comfortable. "It's perfect," Joanna said brightly, though Jerry caught her eyeing the heavy Victorian furniture with dismay. Mrs. Simington introduced her stepdaughter, Megan Hunter, a lanky girl of about 20 with a sullen air and untidy brown hair. Megan muttered a greeting and promptly disappeared upstairs, leaving her stepmother to show them around. The house was spacious, if a trifle gloomy, with high ceilings and windows overlooking a neat garden. Mrs. Simington explained that she and her family lived in a smaller cottage nearby, as Little Firs was too large for their needs since her husband's death. "My boys, Colin and Brian, are at school most days," she added, her voice flat, "and Megan keeps to herself." Was served in the drawing room by Elsie Holland, the governess, a strikingly pretty young woman with golden curls and a serene smile. She moved with practised grace, pouring tea and offering scones, but Jerry noticed Mrs. Simington's lips tighten as Elsie spoke. Joanna, ever quick to charm, drew Elsie into conversation about the village, learning that Lymstock boasted a vicar, a doctor, and a solicitor, all of whom seemed to define its social pulse. "It sounds positively feudal," Joanna said, laughing. "Do you have a village gossip to complete the picture?" Elsie hesitated, then smiled. "Oh, there's always talk. People notice everything here." As evening fell, Jerry and Joanna settled into their new quarters. The quiet was profound, broken only by the distant bark of a dog and the creak of the old house. They were unpacking when a sharp rap at the door startled them. Joanna opened it to find a local boy, red-faced and breathless, thrusting an envelope into her hands before scampering off. "What's this?" Jerry asked, joining her. The envelope was cheap, addressed in blocky type to Mr. and Miss Burton. Inside was a single sheet, the words typed in uneven letters. "You filthy sinners, pretending to be brother and sister while living in sin. The village knows your shame." Joanna gasped, then burst into laughter. "Oh, Jerry, how absurd! Someone thinks we're, what, illicit lovers?" Jerry's amusement was tempered by a chill. The letter's venom, though ridiculous, carried a calculated malice. He turned it over, noting the smudged postmark and the lack of signature. "A prank, maybe," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Still, it's a rotten way to welcome us." Joanna tossed the letter onto the table. "Let's burn it and forget it. Honestly, what a place." But Jerry couldn't shake the unease as he gazed out at the darkened garden, the lights of Lymstock twinkling in the distance. He wondered what secrets lay beneath the village's tranquil facade. Little Furze, with its polished surfaces and silent rooms, seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for something to unfold. Chapter 2. The Poison. The morning sun filtered through the lace curtains of Little Furze, casting delicate shadows across the breakfast table where Jerry Burton sat. The offending letter from the previous evening still vivid in his mind. Joanna, dressed in a bright green sweater that clashed cheerfully with the room's sombre tones, was buttering toast with unnecessary vigour. "I say, Jerry, we ought to frame that wretched thing," she remarked, her eyes glinting with mischief. "Our first Lymstock souvenir." Jerry frowned, stirring his tea. "I'd rather know who sent it. It's not just a joke, Joe. There's spite in it." He pushed the letter toward her, its typed venom stark against the cheap paper. Joanna's smile faded as she reread the words, her brow creasing. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Mrs. Baker, the Daily, help, ushered in Mrs. Dane Calthrop, the vicar's wife, a wiry woman with a sharp nose and an air of restless energy. Her tweed skirt was slightly askew, and her eyes darted about the room as if cataloguing every detail. "Good morning," she exclaimed, settling uninvited into a chair. "I heard you'd arrived, and I simply had to pop by. Lymstock's not used to new faces, you know." Joanna, quick to match her enthusiasm, offered tea, which Mrs. Dane Calthrop accepted with a distracted nod. "You're settling in, I hope. Little Furze is charming, though I always thought it too grand for the Simingtons after poor Dick's death." Her voice trailed off, then sharpened. "But tell me, have you had one yet?" Jerry exchanged a glance with Joanna. "One what?" he asked, though he suspected the answer. Mrs. Dane Calthrop leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "A letter. Nasty typed things, full of filth. They've been going round the village for weeks. The vicar got one, accusing him of, well, never mind. And Miss Ginch, the schoolmistress, had one about her and the organist. Perfectly absurd, but horrid." Joanna's eyes widened. "We did get one," she admitted, retrieving the letter from the table. "Last night. It's ridiculous, of course, but rather unsettling." Mrs. Dane Calthrop scanned the letter, her lips pursing. "Yes, That's the style. Same typewriter, same vile tone. The police have been useless. Inspector Graves thinks it's a local crank, but he's no imagination. I told Caleb it's someone with a twisted mind, hiding behind this anonymous drivel. She handed the letter back, her expression fierce. You mustn't let it upset you. Burn it. That's my advice. Jerry, intrigued, pressed for details. Mrs. Dane Calthrop obliged, recounting how the letters had targeted a dozen villagers. Dr. Owen Griffith, accused of tampering with prescriptions. Mr. Pye, the solicitor, slandered with hints of unsavoury habits. Even the butcher's wife taunted about her son's paternity. None of it's true, as far as anyone can tell, she said. But it's stirring up mistrust. People are looking sideways at each other. As she spoke, the door opened, and a slight elderly woman entered, her white hair neatly coiled, and her eyes bright behind steel-rimmed spectacles. Mrs. Dane Calthrop introduced her as Miss Jane Marple, a friend visiting from St. Mary Mead. Jane's frightfully clever about people, she added. She sees things others miss. Miss Marple smiled faintly, settling into a chair with a piece of knitting she produced from a capacious bag. A village is much the same everywhere, she said, her voice soft but precise. And anonymous letters, I'm afraid, are not uncommon. They thrive on secrets, or the illusion of them. Her needles clicked rhythmically, and Jerry felt an odd sense of being observed, though her gaze remained on her work. Do you think it's someone local? He asked, curious despite himself. Oh, almost certainly, Miss Marple replied. The letters show knowledge of Lymstock's little ways, grudges, habits, who speaks to whom, but their purpose interests me more. Are they meant to wound, to divide, or to conceal something else entirely? She paused, her eyes meeting Jerry's for a moment, sharp and searching. Mrs. Dane Calthrop rose abruptly. Jane, you're too clever by half. Come, let's leave these young people to their breakfast. But do come to the vicarage soon, both of you. We'll have a proper gossip. With a wave, she swept Miss Marple out, leaving a charged silence behind. Joanna tossed her napkin down. Well, that's a fine start to our quiet retreat. A village full of poison pens and a sleuthing spinster. What next? Jerry didn't answer. He was staring at the letter, its words seeming to pulse with malice. Lymstock, with its picturesque calm, was beginning to feel like a stage where unseen actors played a darker game. And Miss Marple's quiet words lingered, hinting at truths yet to be uncovered. Chapter 3. A Tragic Turn. The soft haze of late spring hung over Lymstock, gilding the village in a deceptive glow of serenity. At Little Furze, Jerry Burton stood at the drawing-room window, his stick resting against the sill, watching the high street stir with morning life. A grocer's van trundled past, and a gaggle of children scampered toward the school, their laughter sharp in the still air. Yet the memory of the anonymous letter, now tucked away in a drawer, gnawed at him. Its venom, though absurd in its accusations, had left a stain on the village's charm. Joanna emerged from the breakfast room, her hair swept into a careless knot, a letter in her hand, not the hateful kind, but a note from their London friends, full of breezy inquiries about their rural exile. They think we're rusticating with cows and yokels, she said, tossing it onto the table. Little do they know we've landed in a nest of intrigue. What's got you so pensive, Jerry?" Stuart turned, his face shadowed. "Just thinking about that letter. Mrs. Dane Calthrop said it's not the only one. I wonder who else has been targeted and why." Joanna shrugged, but her eyes betrayed unease. "Probably some bored busybody with too much time. Let's not. Let it spoil things. Fancy a walk. We could explore the village properly." Jerry agreed, hoping movement might shake off his disquiet. They donned coats and set out, the crunch of gravel underfoot giving way to the cobbles of the high street. Lymstock was waking fully now. Shopkeepers swept their doorsteps, and a postman cycled past, his bag bulging. At the bakery, they paused to buy scones, and the baker's wife, Mrs. Cleet, a stout woman with shrewd eyes, chatted amiably about the weather, but watched them closely, as if weighing their place in the village's tapestry. Their walk took them past the church, its grey stone cool in the sunlight, where they encountered the vicar, Mr. Caleb Dane Calthrop, a tall, stooped man with a distracted air. He greeted them warmly, his thin face lighting up. "The Burtons, yes. Maud told me you'd settled in. I do hope Lymstock suits you. It's a quiet place generally." His voice faltered, and Jerry caught a flicker of strain. "Generally?" Joanna prompted, her tone light but probing. The vicar hesitated, then sighed. "Well, there's been some unpleasantness lately. Letters, you know, anonymous ones, quite dreadful." He shook his head. "I had one myself, accusing me of, well, it's too ridiculous to repeat, but it's upset the parish. People are on edge." Jerry exchanged a glance with Joanna. "We received one too," he admitted. "Last night. It was vicious." Mr. Dane Calthrop's eyes widened. "Good. Heavens, you as well. I'm so sorry. The police are looking into it, but they've no leads yet. I pray it's just a passing madness." He excused himself, hurrying towards the vicarage, his shoulders hunched. As they continued their walk, Joanna murmured, "It's worse than we thought, isn't it? The whole village is rattled." Jerry nodded, his mind turning over the vicar's words. The letters were not isolated pranks, but a spreading poison, tainting Lymstock's peace. They looped back toward Little Firs, passing the Women's Institute, a low brick building where a cluster of women chatted animatedly. Among them was Miss Ginch, the schoolmistress, a thin, angular woman with a pinched mouth. She nodded curtly as they passed, but her eyes lingered sharp and suspicious. Back at the house, they found Mrs. Baker bustling in the kitchen, her apron dusted with flour. She was a font of village lore, and Jerry, seizing the opportunity, asked casually about the letters. Mrs. Baker's face darkened. "Oh, aye, they're a wicked business," she said, kneading dough with fierce energy. "My cousin's husband Jim Spriggs got one, saying he'd been thieving from the shop. Near broke his heart it did, and not a word of truth. Whoever's writing 'em ought to be horsewhipped." "Do you think it's someone local?" Jerry asked, leaning against the counter. "Must be," Mrs. Baker replied. "They know too much. Private things, like who's feuding or who's been seen where. But I'll tell you this, it's no ordinary gossip. There's hate in those letters, Mr. Burton. Pure hate." Her words stayed with Jerry as he and Joanna settled in the drawing room. The day passed quietly, but the undercurrent of unease grew. That evening, as they dined on cold ham and salad, a sharp knock interrupted them. Mrs. Baker, who hadn't yet left, opened the door and returned with a grave expression. "It's Miss Megan, sir, from Mrs. Simington's. She says you're to come quick. There's trouble." Jerry's heart quickened. He grabbed his stick, and Joanna followed, her face pale. They hurried down the lane to the Simingtons' cottage, a neat, ivy-clad house with a low gate. Megan met them at the door, her eyes red-rimmed, her usual sullenness replaced by raw distress. "It's Mother," she whispered. She's dead." Inside, the cottage was in chaos. Elsie Holland, the governess, stood in the hall, her face ashen, wringing her hands. Dr. Owen Griffith, a lean, dark-haired man with a brisk manner, emerged from the parlour, his medical bag in hand. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "There was nothing I could do. She's been gone at least an hour." Jerry and Joanna followed him into the parlour, where Mrs. Simington lay on a chaise longue, her face serene but unnaturally still. A glass tumbler lay overturned on the floor, its contents staining the rug, and in her hand was a crumpled sheet of paper. Jerry's stomach turned as he recognized the typed script of an anonymous letter. Owen pointed to a small vial on the table. "Cyanide," he said grimly. "She must have taken it herself. The letter, it seems to have pushed her over the edge." Megan, hovering in the doorway, let out a choked sob. Joanna moved to comfort her, but the girl shrank back. "What does it say?" Jerry asked, his voice low. Owen hesitated, then handed him the letter, careful not to touch the text. The words were stark, brutal. "You shameless hussy, carrying on with that man behind your husband's back. Everyone knows your disgrace." Jerry felt a chill. The accusation was vague, yet its cruelty was surgical, designed to wound. Inspector Graves, a stocky man with a methodical air, arrived soon after, his notebook already open. He questioned them briefly, his eyes lingering on the letter. "We'll need to send this for analysis," he said, "but it looks like the others. Same typewriter, same style." He turned to Owen. "You're sure it's suicide, Doctor?" Owen nodded, though his jaw tightened. "The signs are clear. Cyanide poisoning, self-administered. She'd been withdrawn lately, according to Elsie. This letter must have been the final straw." Elsie, summoned to the parlour, confirmed this, her voice trembling. "She was quiet these past few days, sir, not herself. I saw her reading that letter this morning, and she went pale as death. I never thought—" She broke off, tears spilling over. Megan, who had been silent, suddenly spoke, her voice sharp. She wasn't like that. She didn't care what people thought. Why would she? She stopped, her hands clenching. Inspector Graves raised an eyebrow, but made no comment. He instructed the body be removed for a post-mortem, and assured them a coroner's inquest would follow. As the police worked, Jerry drew Megan aside. "What did you mean, Megan, about your mother not caring?" Megan's eyes darted away. "Nothing. She was strong. She wouldn't let a stupid letter do this." Her voice cracked and she fled upstairs, leaving Jerry with more questions than answers. Back at Little Furze, Joanna poured them, both a stiff brandy. "This is awful," she said, her usual buoyancy gone. "That poor woman. And Megan, she's shattered. Do you think it was really suicide?" Jerry stared into his glass, the letter's words echoing in his mind. "I don't know. It's too neat somehow. The letter, the cyanide, the timing, it feels staged. He paused, recalling Miss Marple's cryptic remark about letters hiding a deeper purpose. There's something we're not seeing, Joe. Something deliberate. The next morning, Lymstock buzzed with the news. At the post office, Jerry overheard whispers of Mrs. Simington's death, the word suicide laced with pity and suspicion. He met Mrs. Dane Calthrop outside the chemist's, her face drawn. "It's a terrible thing," she said. "Maud Simington was no saint, but to be driven to this. Those letters are the devil's work." "Have there been more?" Jerry asked. She nodded. "2 this week that I know of. One to Mrs. Cleet, another to old Mr. Pye. It's tearing the village apart." She lowered her voice. "Jane Marple's at the vicarage. You should talk to her. She's got a way of seeing through nonsense." Jerry found Miss Marple in the vicarage garden, seated on a bench with her knitting, the morning light catching the silver in her hair. She greeted him with a gentle smile, but her eyes were keen, missing nothing. "A sad business, Mr. Burton," she said. "Mrs. Simington's death has shaken everyone." He sat beside her, unsure how to begin. "The police think it's suicide, because of the letter, but I'm not convinced. It's too convenient." Miss Marple's needles paused. "Convenient?" she repeated softly. "Yes, that's a good word. Suicide can be a very convenient explanation, can't it? Especially if someone wishes a death to go unquestioned." She resumed knitting, her voice calm but weighted. "In my village we had a case once. A woman found dead, a letter by her side. Everyone assumed she'd taken her life. But it turned out the letter was a forgery, and the poison was no accident." Jerry's pulse quickened. "You think this could be murder?" "I think," Miss Marple said, "that we must consider all possibilities. Anonymous letters are rarely just spite. They can be a distraction, a tool to obscure something uglier. Tell me, what was Mrs. Simington like? And her household? Were they happy?" Jerry thought back to their brief interactions. "She was reserved, almost cold. Megan said she was strong, not the type to break under gossip. The household, there's tension. Elsie, the governess, seems out of place, and Megan's an outsider in her own home. I don't know about the boys. They're away at school." Miss Marple nodded, her eyes distant. "Families are complicated, Mr. Burton, and money or love or secrets can complicate them further. I'd be curious to know who benefits from Mrs. Simington's death, and who might have wanted her silenced." Her words lingered as Jerry returned to Little Furze. The village, with its blooming gardens and tidy shops, seemed a mockery now, its peace shattered by a death that felt less like despair and more like design. He resolved to watch closely, to listen to the whispers, and to seek out the truth Miss Marple hinted at. For in Lymstock, the poison pen had drawn blood, and Jerry feared it was only the beginning. Chapter 4. Suspicion spreads. The days following Mrs. Simington's death draped Lymstock in a pall of unease, as if the village held its breath, waiting for the next blow. At Little Furze, Jerry Burton sat in the drawing-room, the morning paper unopened on his lap, his thoughts circling the coroner's inquest held the previous day. The verdict had been suicide, delivered with clinical detachment, cyanide poisoning, triggered by the anonymous letter found in her hand. Yet the ruling sat uneasily with him. its tidiness too stark against the chaos of the village's whispers. Joanna, sprawled on the sofa with a cup of tea, was less restrained in her scepticism. "It's too pat, Jerry," she said, her voice sharp. "A letter arrives, she reads it, and poof, she's dead. I don't buy it. Maud Simington didn't strike me as the sort to crumple under a bit of nastiness." Jerry nodded, his fingers tracing the handle of his stick. "There's something off about it. The letter was vicious, but so are the others. Why did this one push her over the edge when others didn't? And the cyanide, where did she get it?" Joanna's eyes narrowed. "Exactly. Cyanide isn't something you pick up at the chemist's. Someone had to procure it, and I'd wager it wasn't her." Their conversation was interrupted by Mrs. Baker, who bustled in with a tray of scones, her face set in lines of disapproval. "Village is in a right state, sir," she said, setting the tray down with a clatter. "More of them letters turned up yesterday. One to Dr. Griffith, saying he's been cosy with his patients, and another to Mr. Pye, hinting at, well, things I won't repeat. It's a disgrace, that's what it is." Jerry leaned forward. "Do people think the letters drove Mrs. Simington to it?" Mrs. Baker snorted. "Some do, some don't. Mrs. Cleet at the bakery reckons it's suicide, but old Miss Barton says Maud wasn't the type. Mind you, Miss Barton's half-deaf, so what she knows is anyone's guess. All I say is, whoever's writing these needs locking up." She swept out, muttering about the devil's work. Joanna raised an eyebrow. "The village oracle has spoken, but she's right about one thing. It's getting worse. What's the point of these letters? They're not just gossip. They're tearing Lymstock apart." Jerry rose, restless. "I want to know more about the Simingtons. Megan's barely spoken since it happened, and Elsie's like a ghost. There's something in that house we're missing." He paused, recalling Miss Marple's suggestion to look for a deeper motive. "Let's pay a call on Megan. She might let something slip." They set out for the Simington cottage, the spring air crisp but heavy with the scent of blooming lilacs. The village was subdued, its usual bustle muted. At the grocer's, a knot of women fell silent as they passed, their eyes darting. Jerry caught fragments of their talk, letters, suicide, scandal, before they resumed in hushed tones. The atmosphere was thick with suspicion, as if every neighbour harboured a secret or a grudge. At the cottage, Elsie Holland answered the door, her golden curls slightly dishevelled, her smile strained. "Oh, Mr. Burton, Miss Burton," she said, stepping aside. "It's kind of you to come. Megan's in the garden, but I warn you, she's not herself." The parlour was dim, its curtains half-drawn, and Jerry noted a faint chemical smell, perhaps a lingering trace of the police's investigation. Elsie led them through to the garden, where Megan sat on a bench, staring at a bed of tulips. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow, and she clutched a crumpled handkerchief. She looked up as they approached, her expression wary. "Megan," Joanna said gently, sitting beside her. "We just wanted to see how you're doing. It must be awful for you." Megan's lips twitched, but no smile came. "Awful," she echoed, her voice flat. "That's one word for it. Everyone's talking, aren't they? About Mother and that letter." Jerry took a seat on a nearby chair, his stick resting against his knee. "They are," he admitted, "but we're not here to gossip. We're worried about you. And we're not sure the letter tells the whole story." Megan's eyes flicked to his, a spark of something, fear, perhaps, or defiance, flashing in them. "What do you mean?" Joanna, sensing her hesitation, leaned closer. "We got a letter too, you know. Nasty thing, full of lies. It made us wonder about the one your mother got. Was she upset before it arrived? Did she say anything?" Megan's fingers tightened on the handkerchief. She was quiet, more than usual. She and Elsie had a row a few days ago, something about the boys' lessons. Mother thought Elsie was too soft with them. But that's all. She hesitated, then added, "She didn't talk to me much. Never did, really. I was just there." Jerry's heart ached at the bitterness in her tone. Megan, the overlooked stepdaughter, seemed adrift in her own home. "Did you see the letter when it came?" he asked. "Or anything odd that day?" Megan shook her head, but her gaze dropped. "I was out walking when it arrived. Elsie said Mother read it and went to her room. That's all I know." Her voice cracked and she stood abruptly. "I'm sorry, I need to be alone." She hurried into the house, leaving them with Elsie, who had been hovering nearby. Elsie wrung her hands, her composure fraying. "She's taking it hard," she said. "We all are. Mrs. Simington was difficult sometimes, but she didn't deserve this." Jerry studied her, noting the faint tremor in her voice. "You were close to her, weren't you? Did she seem distressed lately?" Elsie's cheeks flushed. "Not close, exactly. I work for her, for the family, I mean. She was private, kept to herself. But yes, she'd been low these past weeks. I thought it was just the strain of managing alone, with Mr. Simington gone." She glanced toward the house, as if fearing eavesdroppers. "That letter, it was cruel. It said things about her and someone else. I can't believe she'd take it so hard, but she did." Joanna's eyes narrowed. "Someone else? Who?" Elsie hesitated, then shook her head. "It didn't name anyone, just hinted at an affair. It was nonsense, of course." But her voice lacked conviction, and Jerry filed the detail away. They left the cottage, the weight of Megan's grief and Elsie's unease pressing on them. As they walked back to Little Firs, Jerry's mind churned. The letters were escalating, their targets multiplying, and Mrs. Simington's death felt like a pivot, a shift in the game. He needed more information, and he knew where to start. That afternoon, he sought out Dr. Owen Griffith at his surgery, a modest building near the church. Owen, a man of few words, was checking his bag when Jerry arrived. His dark eyes were tired, and a fresh letter, its typed script unmistakable, lay on his desk. "Another one," Owen said, catching Jerry's glance. "Accuses me of seducing a patient. Utter rot, but it's doing damage. My practice is suffering." Jerry winced. "I'm sorry, we got one too, and now Mrs. Simington. Do you think the letter really drove her to it?" Owen's jaw tightened. "I don't know. I saw her that morning. She was pale, distracted, but not suicidal, I'd swear. The cyanide puzzles me. It's not easy to come by, and I keep mine locked up. Someone got hold of it, though." He paused, then added, "I heard Mr. Pye got one too. He's in a state, poor chap." Jerry's interest sharpened. "Pye? What did it say?" Owen shrugged. "Something about his private life. He's a sensitive sort, takes it personally. You should ask him yourself. He's at Netherby Hall." Netherby Hall was a sprawling, slightly dilapidated manor on the village's edge, home to Amy Pye, A fastidious bachelor with a taste for antiques and gossip, Jerry found him in his study, surrounded by porcelain figurines and leather-bound books, his thin face drawn. "Mr. Burton," Pye greeted, his voice high and brittle. "You've heard, I suppose? The letters have reached even me." Jerry nodded, accepting a chair. "I'm sorry to intrude, but I'm trying to understand these letters. What did yours say?" Pye's cheeks reddened. It was vile. Insinuations about my preferences. Wholly untrue, but designed to humiliate. I burned it, but the damage is done. People stare, you know. They wonder. He shuddered, his fingers twisting a silk handkerchief. And now poor Maud Simington. It's too dreadful. "Do you think her letter was the cause?" Jerry asked. Pye's eyes flickered. "It must have been. She was a proud woman, not one to bear public shame. But I'll tell you this, Mr. Burton, these letters aren't random. They're too precise, too knowing. Someone in Lymstock is behind. This, someone who watches us all." Jerry left Netherby Hall with a growing sense of the letters' reach. They were a web, ensnaring the village in doubt and fear, and Mrs. Simington's death was its dark centre. That evening, he and Joanna dined at the vicarage, invited by Mrs. Dane Calthrop. The company included Miss Marple, whose quiet presence seemed to anchor the room, and Dr. Griffith, who arrived late, his mood sombre. Over roast lamb, the talk turned inevitably to the letters. Mrs. Dane Calthrop was vehement. "It's a poison, that's what it is, spreading lies, ruining lives, and now Maud's gone. We must do something." Owen, cutting his meat with precision, said, "The police are trying, but they're stumped. The typewriters from the Women's Institute, but dozens have access. It's a needle in a haystack." Miss Marple, who had been silent, spoke softly. "A needle, yes, but one that leaves a thread. These letters are not as random as they seem. They create a fog, don't they? A fog to hide something specific. I wonder, Dr. Griffith, if you've noticed anything unusual in the village lately, beyond the letters." Owen frowned. "Unusual? Not really. Though there's been talk about Elsie Holland. Some say she's too close to the Simington boys, almost like a mother. It's caused friction, I hear." Jerry's pulse quickened, recalling Elsie's unease. Friction with Mrs. Simington? Owen nodded. Possibly. Maud was protective of her sons. She didn't like sharing their affection. Miss Marple's needles clicked steadily. "A household divided can be a fertile ground for trouble," she said, "and letters, you know, can exploit such divisions. They can point fingers, stir jealousies, or distract from a truth closer to home." Her words hung in the air, and Jerry felt a chill. The letters were a mask, she was saying, concealing a motive yet unseen. As they left the vicarage, Joanna linked her arm through his, her voice low. "Miss Marple's onto something, isn't she? This isn't just about spite, it's about someone playing a very clever game." Jerry agreed, his mind racing. Dobeku, at Little Furs, he sat by the fire, piecing together the fragments. The letter's precision, Mrs. Simington's death, the cyanide's mystery, and the Simington household's tensions. Megan's grief, Elsie's evasions, and Owen's guardedness all pointed to a truth buried in the village's heart. Miss Marple's hint of a hidden motive echoed, urging him to look beyond the surface. Lymstock, with its quaint facade, was a stage for deception, and Jerry was determined to unmask the player before the curtain fell again. Chapter 5. A Second Death. The shadow of Mrs. Simington's death clung to Lymstock like morning mist, deepening the village's unease as the anonymous letters continued their insidious spread. At Little Furze, Jerry Burton sat in the study, his stick propped against the desk, poring over a notebook where he jotted details of the letters and their recipients. The list was growing. The vicar, Dr. Griffith, Mr. Pye, the baker's wife, and now, according to Mrs. Baker's morning gossip, the postmistress, Mrs. Mudge, accused of pilfering parcels. Each letter was a dart, precise in its cruelty. Yet Jerry sensed a pattern beneath the chaos, a thread he couldn't yet grasp. Joanna entered, her cheeks flushed from a brisk walk. "You're brooding again," she said, tossing her scarf onto a chair. "Any grand theories about our poison pen?" Jerry tapped his pencil against the notebook. "Nothing solid. But the letters aren't random. They know too much about their targets. And Mrs. Simington's death, it's like a fulcrum. Everything's tilting around it." Joanna perched on the desk, her eyes bright with curiosity. "You think it's murder, don't you? Not suicide?" "I think it's possible," Jerry said carefully. "The cyanide, the letter, the timing, it's all too convenient. And Megan's insistence that her mother wasn't the type to give in, it nags at me." Their discussion was cut short by a sharp knock at the door. Mrs. Baker ushered in Agnes Waddle, the Simingtons' maid, a slight girl with mousy hair and a nervous air. Her hands twisted in her apron, and her eyes darted between them. "Beg pardon, sir, miss," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know who else to come to. It's about Mrs. Simington." Jerry gestured to a chair, his pulse quickening. "Sit down, Agnes. What's wrong?" Agnes perched on the edge of the seat, her fingers plucking at her sleeve. "I shouldn't be here, I know, but I can't stop thinking about it. The day Mrs. Simington died, I saw something odd. I meant to tell the police, but I was scared, and now—" She trailed off, her face pale. Joanna leaned forward, her tone gentle. "You're safe here, Agnes. What did you see?" Agnes swallowed hard. "It was in the morning, before the letter came. I was polishing the silver in the dining room, and I heard Mrs. Simington in the parlour, talking to someone. Not loud, but sharp. I couldn't hear the words, but she sounded angry. Then I peeked through the door, and I saw her with Miss Holland. Elsie, I mean. They were standing close, and Mrs. Simington's face was all tight, like she was holding back tears. Elsie said something low, and Mrs. Simington snapped, "You'll regret this." Then she stormed out. Jerry's mind raced. "Did you tell anyone, Elsie or Megan?" Agnes shook her head. "No, sir, I didn't dare. Elsie's kind, but she's different since it happened. And Megan's so upset I didn't want to bother her. But it's been eating at me, and with all these letters I thought, maybe it means something." Joanna exchanged a glance with Jerry. "It might, Agnes. Did you notice anything else that day? Anything about the letter, or Mrs. Simington's mood?" Agnes frowned, thinking. She was quiet after that row, kept to her room. The letter came at noon, and Elsie took it to her. I saw Mrs. Simington later in the hall holding it. She looked not sad exactly, but like she was thinking hard. That's all I know. She stood, anxious. I've got to get back. Please, don't tell anyone I came. I don't want trouble. Jerry assured her they'd keep her confidence, and she slipped out, her footsteps fading down the lane. Joanna turned to him, her eyes wide. A row with Elsie. That's new. Do you think it's connected to the letter? It could be, Jerry said, his mind turning over Agnes's words. Mrs. Simington was angry, maybe threatened. If Elsie's involved somehow, it changes things. We need to talk to her again, but carefully. Their plans were disrupted by a call from Mrs. Dane Calthrop, inviting them to tea at the vicarage. Bring your wits, she said over the crackling line. Jane Marple's here, and she's got that look in her eye. Jerry and Joanna agreed, sensing an opportunity to glean more from Miss Marple's sharp insights. The vicarage was a rambling house, its rooms cluttered with books and faded chintz. Mrs. Dane Calthrop greeted them with her usual fervour, her tweed skirt askew as she waved them into the drawing-room. Miss Marple sat by the fire, her knitting a soft blur in her hands, her eyes bright with quiet observation. Dr. Owen Griffith was there too, his lean frame slouched in an armchair, a faint frown creasing his brow. Tea was served with scones and jam, but the mood was far from convivial. Mrs. Dane Calthrop launched into the topic at once. It's these wretched letters, she said, slamming the teapot down. They're a plague. And now poor Maud's gone, and no one's doing a thing about it. Jane, you must have ideas. Miss Marple smiled faintly, her needles pausing. Ideas, Maud? Perhaps, but facts are better. Mr. Burton, have you learned anything new about these letters? Jerry hesitated, mindful of Agnes's plea for secrecy, but decided to share what he could. We've heard more have surfaced. Mrs. Mudge got one, and there's talk of others. They're hitting hard, stirring up old grudges. And there's something about the Simington household that doesn't add up. Tensions, I mean, before the death. Owen's head snapped up. Tensions? What kind? Joanna, sensing Jerry's caution, stepped in. Just impressions. Megan's so withdrawn, and Elsie seems on edge. It's a strained house, isn't it? Owen nodded slowly. It was. Maud was a strong personality. Domineering, some might say. She clashed with Elsie over the boys, thought she was too indulgent. And Megan, well, she's always been a bit lost there. Dick Simington's death left them all adrift. Miss Marple's eyes flickered with interest. A household out of balance can be a dangerous thing, she said softly. And letters, you know, can exploit such fault lines. They can wound, yes, but they can also distract. I wonder if Mrs. Simington's letter was meant to obscure something else. A truth she knew, perhaps, or a threat she posed. Ged. Pulse quickened. You think the letter was a cover? For what? Miss Marple resumed knitting, her voice calm but weighted. That's the question, isn't it? In my village we had a case once. A young woman died, supposedly by her own hand, after a letter accused her of theft. But the letter was a ruse, meant to hide a theft of another kind. People, Mr. Burton, are rarely what they seem. And death can be a very convenient way to silence someone. Her words hung in the air, and Jerry felt a chill. Before he could press further, the door burst open, and Inspector Graves strode in, his face grim. Mrs. Dane Calthrop, I'm sorry to interrupt, he said, nodding to the group. "Mr. Burton? Miss Burton, you're here. Good. I've bad news. Agnes Waddell, the Simington's maid, was found this morning. Dead, bludgeoned, in a ditch near the mill." Joanna gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Jerry's stomach lurched, Agnes's frightened face flashing in his mind. "When?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Last night, we think," Graves said. "She was seen leaving work at 6, but never made it home. A farmer found her at dawn. No sign of robbery. Her purse was untouched. We're treating it as murder." Mrs. Dane Calthrop's face paled. "Agnes! That poor girl! Why would anyone—" "Graves!" "Cut in. We're looking into it. But given the letters and Mrs. Simington's death, I'm wondering if there's a link. Agnes worked in that house. She might have seen something, known something." Jerry's mind raced. Agnes's visit, her story about the row between Mrs. Simington and Elsie. It was too close to her death to be coincidence. "Did she say anything to you?" he asked, careful not to betray her confidence. "About the letters, or Mrs. Simington?" Graves shook his head. "Not a word. Her family says she was nervous lately, but that's all. If you hear anything, you'll tell me." Jerry nodded, his thoughts in turmoil. As Graves left, the room erupted in speculation. Mrs. Dane Calthrop paced, muttering about a maniac, while Owen stared into his tea, his expression unreadable. Miss Marple, however, remained serene, her needles clicking steadily. "This changes things," she said at last, her voice cutting through the chatter. "A second death, so soon after the first, and a maid who sees and hears more than most. I think, Mr. Burton, you might find it useful to look at who was near the Simington house yesterday, and who might have feared what Agnes knew." Her words struck like a match, illuminating Jerry's suspicions. Agnes had been scared, and now she was dead, silenced before she could share more. He resolved to dig deeper, starting with Elsie and the Simington household. The next morning, he and Joanna walked to the cottage, the village hushed under a grey sky. At the grocer's, whispers followed them. Talk of Agnes's murder, of the letters, of curses. The air was thick with fear, and Jerry felt eyes on them, as if Lymstock itself were watching. Elsie met them at the door, her face drawn, her usual poise fraying. "You've heard about Agnes?" she said, leading them to the parlour. "It's horrible. I can't believe it." Megan was absent at school with the boys, and the house felt emptier, its silence oppressive. Jerry studied Elsie, noting the dark circles under her eyes. "It's a shock," he said. "Agnes was here the day Mrs. Simington died. Did she seem worried or say anything unusual?" Elsie shook her head, her fingers twisting a lace handkerchief. "Not that I recall. She was quiet, always was. Just did her work and kept to herself." Her voice trembled and she looked away. "I keep thinking, if I'd noticed something, maybe she'd be alive." Joanna's tone was soft but probing. "You had a lot on your mind with Mrs. Simington's death. It must have been tense here, especially after that letter." Elsie's cheeks flushed. "It was. Mrs. Simington was upset, naturally. The letter was awful, accusing her of things that weren't true. I tried to comfort her, but she didn't want to talk." She paused, then added, "Agnes might have overheard us, I suppose. She was always about polishing or fetching, Jerry's heart skipped. Overheard what? Elsie hesitated, her eyes darting to the door. Just talk. About the boys or the house. Nothing important. But her voice lacked conviction, and Jerry sensed she was holding back. They left soon after, Elsie's evasions fueling Jerry's suspicions. As they walked back, Joanna said, "She's hiding something. That row Agnes saw. It's more than a spat over lessons, I'd bet." Jerry agreed, his mind turning to Miss Marple's warning about a truth obscured. That afternoon he sought her out at the vicarage, finding her in the garden, pruning roses with delicate precision. She listened as he recounted Agnes's visit and death, her face serene, but her eyes sharp. "A maid is a dangerous person to know too much," she said, snipping a wilted bloom. "In my village we had a case. A girl saw something she shouldn't, and she didn't live to tell it. Agnes's death suggests someone feared her knowledge. Tell me, Mr. Burton, who was in the Simington house that day, and who had reason to silence her?" Jerry listed the household: Elsie, Megan, the boys, and Mrs. Simington, now dead. "Elsie's the key, I think. She's nervous, evasive, and Agnes saw her arguing with Mrs. Simington." Miss Marple nodded. "Miss Holland is worth watching, but don't overlook the others. Megan, for instance. Grief can hide many things, and the boys, though young, are part of that house's dynamic. As for the letters, they're a smokescreen, I'm sure. They create noise, confusion to mask a single act. Look for the act, Mr. Burton. Look for the why." Her words stayed with him as he returned to Little Furze. Lymstock was unraveling, its secrets spilling like blood. Agnes's murder was a warning, a sign the letter-writer's game had turned deadly. Jerry knew he had to move carefully, to peel back the village's layers before another life was lost. The poison pen was still at work, and its next strike was only a matter of time. Chapter 6. The Village Unravels. The air in Lymstock carried a new weight, as if the village itself were bracing for further calamity. Agnes Waddell's murder, following so closely on Mrs. Simington's death, had shattered the illusion of rural tranquility, and the anonymous letters, far from abating, seemed to multiply like weeds. At Little Furze, Jerry Burton stood by the study window, watching rain streak the panes, his notebook open to a page crowded with names and connections. The ink blurred under his gaze, but his thoughts were sharp, tracing the web of suspicion that now entangled the village. Joanna entered, shaking rain from her coat, her usual vivacity dimmed. "It's grim out there, Jerry," she said, tossing her scarf onto a chair. "The high street's like a funeral. Everyone's whispering about Agnes, and those blasted letters are still coming. Mrs. Cleet got another one this morning. Something about her cooking the books at the bakery. She's threatening to sue the post office." Jerry turned, his jaw tight. "It's getting out of hand. Agnes's death wasn't random. She knew something, and someone made sure she wouldn't talk. We need to find out what she saw, and fast, before this gets worse." Joanna nodded, settling onto the sofa. "What's your next move? Elsie's hiding something, that's clear, but she's not the only one acting strange. Megan's like a ghost, and Owen Griffith's been dodging me since the vicarage tea. He knows more than he's letting on." Jerry tapped his notebook. "I'm going to the Simington cottage again. Elsie's our best lead, but I'll need to catch her off guard and I want to talk to Megan, alone, if possible. She's holding back, whether from grief or fear. Then there's the typewriter at the Women's Institute. If we can narrow down who's had access, we might get a step closer." Their planning was interrupted by a knock, and Mrs. Baker bustled in, her face flushed with indignation. "You'll never believe it, sir," she said, brandishing a duster like a weapon. Another letter's turned up, this time at the vicarage. To Mrs. Dane Calthrop, no less, accusing her of meddling in folks' lives. She's spitting mad, says she'll find the writer herself if the police won't. Jerry's stomach tightened. Was it typed like the others? "Aye, same as always," Mrs. Baker said. "Cheap paper, blocky letters. Inspector Graves took it, but he's no nearer catching the culprit. Folk are saying it's a curse on Lymstock, and I'm half inclined to believe 'em." She swept out, muttering about locking her doors at night. Joanna raised an eyebrow. "A curse? That's new. But it shows how scared people are. We'd better move quickly, Jerry, or the village will tear itself apart." Determined to act, Jerry and Joanna decided to host an impromptu tea at Little Furze that afternoon, inviting key villagers to gauge their reactions and probe for clues. Joanna sent notes to the Simingtons' household, the vicarage, Dr. Griffith, and Mr. Pye, framing it as a gesture of neighbourly goodwill. "If we get them talking," she said, "someone's bound to slip." The drawing-room was soon abuzz with guests, the clink of teacups mingling with strained conversation. Mrs. Dane Calthrop arrived first, her eyes blazing with resolve, accompanied by Miss Marple, whose quiet presence seemed to steady the room. Owen Griffith followed, his manner distracted, and Mr. Pye swept in with theatrical flair, his silk cravat a splash of colour against the sombre mood. Elsie Holland came alone, explaining that Megan was unwell and the boys were with a neighbour. Her smile was brittle, and she kept to the edges of the room, avoiding Owen's gaze. Joanna played hostess with charm, steering the talk to village matters, but the letters loomed like a spectre. Mrs. Dane Calthrop broke the tension, slamming her cup down. "It's intolerable," she declared. "These letters are a poison, and now Agnes is dead. I've half a mind to stand in the high street and demand the writer show themselves." Mr. Pye, dabbing his lips with a napkin, offered a thin smile. "My dear Maud, it's hardly so simple. This is the work of a repressed soul, mark my words. A spinster, perhaps, with a grudge against the world. Someone like—" He paused, his eyes flicking to Miss Ginch, who had just arrived, her angular frame rigid with affront. Miss Ginch bristled. "I beg your pardon, Mr. Pye. If you're implying I'd stoop to such filth, you're gravely mistaken. I received one, myself, accusing me of— Well, never mind. It's slander, pure and simple." Her voice shook, and Jerry noted the flush creeping up her neck. Owen, stirring his tea, spoke up. "Let's not start accusing each other. The letters are designed to divide us. Whoever's behind them wants us at each other's throats." Miss Marple, who had been silent, set her knitting aside. "Quite right, Dr. Griffith. Division is their purpose, or part of it. In my village we had a rash of letters once, and they served to distract from a theft. Here, I suspect, they may hide something graver. Poor Agnes, for instance. She was in a position to see things, wasn't she? Things that might threaten someone." Her words landed like a stone in a pond, rippling through the room. Elsie's cup clattered in its saucer, and Jerry caught her glance toward the door, as if she longed to flee. He seized the moment, turning to her. "Elsie, you were with Agnes every day. Did she ever mention anything odd about the household? Anything that might explain why she was targeted?" Elsie's eyes widened, her composure fraying. "No, nothing. She was a quiet girl, always working. I can't imagine why anyone would hurt her." Her voice was too quick, and Jerry sensed a lie. But before he could press, Mrs. Dane Calthrop changed the subject, railing about the police's inaction. The year, tea ended with little resolved, but Jerry's suspicions deepened. Elsie's nervousness, Miss Ginch's defensiveness, and Owen's reticence all pointed to secrets simmering beneath the village's surface. As the guests departed, Miss Marple lingered, her eyes meeting Jerry's. "You're asking the right questions, Mr. Burton," she said softly. "But be careful. A cornered creature can be dangerous." That evening, Jerry and Joanna walked to the Women's Institute, a squat brick building where the typewriter used for the letters was kept. The rain had stopped, leaving the air damp and heavy. Mrs. Mudge, the postmistress, was locking up as they arrived, her face drawn. "You're here about the typewriter, I suppose?" she said, her voice sharp. "Everyone is. Well, it's still there, and no one's touched it, far as I know." She let them in, leading them to a small office cluttered with papers and sewing supplies. The typewriter, an old Underwood, sat on a desk, its keys worn but functional. Jerry examined it, noting the uneven alignment of the letters, a match for the anonymous notes. "Who has access to this?" he asked. Mrs. Mudge snorted. "Half the village, near enough. The Institute's open most days, committees, classes, what have you. Miss Ginch is here often, and Mrs. Dane Calthrop, and Elsie Holland comes for the sewing circle. Even Mr. Pye pops in, fussing about the flower show. I can't watch everyone." Joanna frowned. "No one's seen anything suspicious? Someone typing when they shouldn't?" "Not a peep," Mrs. Mudge said. "But I'll tell you this, those letters are the devil's work. My cousin got one yesterday, saying she's been cheating at cards. She's in tears, and now Agnes. It's a bad business." She ushered them out, locking the door with a clank. Back at Little Furze, Jerry's frustration grew. The typewriter was a dead end, accessible to too many. But Agnes's death and Elsie's evasions kept circling in his mind. He resolved to confront Elsie directly. But first he needed to see Megan. The next morning he found her at the cottage, sitting in the parlour with a book she wasn't reading. Her face was pale, her eyes shadowed, but she greeted him with a flicker of warmth. "Megan," Jerry began, sitting across from her, "I know this is hard, but I need to ask about Agnes. She came to me before she died, said she saw something the day your mother died. A row between your mother and Elsie. Do you know anything about that?" Megan's hands tightened on the book. "A row? Maybe. Mother was cross with Elsie sometimes, about the boys. She thought Elsie was trying to take her place, being too motherly, but I didn't see anything that day. I was out." Her voice faltered, and she looked away. Jerry pressed gently. "Agnes thought it was important, and now she's dead. If there's anything you're not saying, Megan, it could help." Megan's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know anything, I swear. Mother was unhappy, but she never told me why. And Elsie, she's been kind to me, but she's different since Mother died, like she's scared." She stood, her voice breaking. "Please, I can't talk about this. It's too much." Jerry left, his heart heavy. Megan's fear was real. But whether it stemmed from grief or knowledge, he couldn't tell. That afternoon, he tracked down Elsie at the village shop, where she was buying thread. She started at his approach, her basket nearly slipping from her hands. "Elsie," he said, keeping his tone light, "we need to talk. Agnes saw you arguing with Mrs. Simington the day she died. What was it about?" Elsie's face paled, her eyes darting to the shopkeeper, who was busy with another customer. "It was nothing," she whispered. "Just a silly disagreement about the boy's schedule. Mrs. Simington was strict, you know that. She overreacted." Jerry stepped closer, his voice low. "Agnes thought it was serious, and now she's dead. If you're holding back, Elsie, it could be dangerous, for you too." Elsie's lips trembled, but she shook her head. "I've told you all I can. Please, leave it alone." She hurried out, leaving Jerry with a sinking feeling. Her fear was palpable, but was it guilt or something else? That evening, a new letter arrived at Little Furze, addressed to Joanna. Its words were vicious, accusing her of flirting with Owen Griffith to trap him. Joanna laughed it off, but Jerry saw the hurt in her eyes. "It's personal now," she said, tossing it into the fire. "Whoever's doing this knows us, Jerry. They're watching." The next day brought worse news. At the bakery, Mrs. Cleet showed Jerry a letter accusing Elsie of poisoning Mrs. Simington for her own gain. The accusation was wild, but its timing, after Agnes's death, felt deliberate. Jerry went to the police, finding Inspector Graves at the station, his desk littered with reports. "This one's different," Graves said, holding up the letter. "It's specific, points a finger. Could be a crack in the case, or just more poison. We're watching Miss Holland, but there's no evidence yet." Jerry shared what he knew, omitting Agnes's visit, but mentioning her sighting of the row. Graves nodded, his eyes weary. "We're stretched thin, Mr. Burton. The village is a powder keg. If you hear anything, come to me." As Jerry left, he ran into Miss Marple outside the church, her umbrella shielding her from a fresh drizzle. She listened as he recounted the latest letter and Elsie's reaction, her face thoughtful. "A letter accusing Miss Holland," she mused. "That's bold. It could be a move to shift blame or to frighten her into silence. Tell me, Mr. Burton, what do you know of the Simington family's past? Before the letters began?" Jerry frowned. "Not much. Dick Simington died a few years ago. Heart attack, I think. Maud took over, raised the boys and Megan. There's money from his law practice, but I don't know details." Miss Marple's eyes gleamed. "Money is always worth looking at. And family dynamics, stepdaughters, governesses, young boys. They can breed resentments, hidden deep. I'd suggest you learn more about Mr. Simington's death and what it left behind. The letters may be a curtain, Mr. Burton, but behind it lies the truth." Her words echoed as Jerry returned to Little Furze. Lymstock was unraveling, its seams splitting under the strain of fear and suspicion. The letters were a weapon, and Agnes's death proved their wielder would kill to protect their secret. Jerry knew he had to tread carefully, to pierce the fog Miss Marple described before the village's fragile peace collapsed entirely. Chapter 7. Jerry's Investigation. The rain that had drenched Lymstock for days gave way to a brittle, sunlit morning, but the village's mood remained clouded. At Little Furze, Jerry Burton sat at the breakfast table, his coffee cooling as he studied his notebook, its pages dense with scribbled connections between the anonymous letters, Mrs. Simington's death, and Agnes Waddle's murder. The latest letter accusing Elsie Holland of poisoning her employer had ignited fresh gossip, and Jerry felt the urgency of unraveling the truth before the village's suspicions spiraled further out of control. Joanna, buttering a slice of toast, glanced at his notes. "You're starting to look like a detective, Jerry," she teased, though her eyes held worry. "Found the mastermind yet?" Jerry pushed the notebook aside, his jaw tight. "Not yet, but I'm close to something." Agnes saw Mrs. Simington and Elsie arguing, and now Elsie's dodging questions. Then there's the cyanide. Owen says it's locked up in his surgery. So how did it get to Mrs. Simington? And Megan, she's hiding something, I'm sure of it. I need to dig deeper. Joanna nodded, her expression serious. "What's the plan? You can't just march into the Simington cottage and demand answers. Elsie's jumpy as a cat, and Megan's barely holding it together." Jerry leaned back, his mind racing. "I'll start with Owen. He's got access to the cyanide, and he's been cagey. Then I'll try Megan again. She might open up if I catch her alone, and I want to know more about Dick Simington's death. Miss Marple hinted it could be key. Money, family tensions, something left behind." Joanna raised an eyebrow. "Miss Marple's got you hooked, hasn't she? That old lady's sharper than a tack. But be careful, Jerry. Whoever's behind this has killed twice. They won't hesitate to do it again." Her warning lingered as Jerry set out for Dr. Owen Griffith's surgery, the village stirring under a pale blue sky. The high street was quieter than usual, shopkeepers lingering in doorways, their conversations hushed. At the butcher's, Jerry overheard a snippet about Elsie. Fancy governess stirring trouble. Before the speaker fell silent, eyeing him warily. Lymstock's trust was fraying, and Jerry felt the weight of being an outsider, watched yet not fully accepted. The surgery was a neat whitewashed building, its waiting room empty save for a nurse sorting files. Owen greeted Jerry in his office, his lean frame tense, a stack of medical records on his desk. "Burton," he said, his tone guarded. "What brings you? Not another letter, I hope." Jerry sat, his stick resting against his knee. "Not this time, but I'm trying to make sense of things. Mrs. Simington's death. Cyanide, you said. From your supply?" Owen's eyes narrowed, but he nodded. "It's likely. I keep a small amount for lab work, locked in a cabinet. I checked after her death, and some was missing. I reported it to Graves, but there's no trace of how it was taken. The cabinet's secure, and only I have the key." Jerry studied him, noting the faint sheen of sweat on his brow. Could anyone else have got to it? A nurse? A patient? Owen shook his head, his voice sharp. "Impossible. The surgery's locked at night, and I'm careful. Whoever took it knew what they were doing." He paused, then added, "You're digging into this, aren't you? Be careful, Burton. People are scared, and scared people lash out." Jerry pressed further. "What about the Simington household? You knew Maud. Was there trouble there, before the letter?" Owen hesitated, his fingers drumming on the desk. "Maud was intense. She ran that house like a general, especially with the boys. Elsie was a sore point. She thought Elsie was too familiar, undermining her authority. And Megan? Maud never quite connected with her. Dick's death left them all strained, but I don't know details. I'm a doctor, not a confidant. Jerry left the surgery with more questions than answers. Owen's defensiveness suggested he knew more, but pushing too hard risked shutting him down. As he walked back through the village, he spotted Megan crossing the high street, her head down, a basket swinging from her arm. Seizing the chance, he caught up with her near the churchyard, where yew trees cast long shadows. "Megan," he called, softening his tone as she turned, her eyes wary. "Can we talk? Just for a moment?" She hesitated, then nodded, clutching the basket tighter. "What do you want? I've got errands." Jerry fell into step beside her, choosing his words carefully. "I'm trying to understand what happened to your mother, to Agnes. You said your mother was strong, not the type to give in to a letter. Was there anything going on before that day? Anything with Elsie or the boys?" Megan's lips pressed into a thin line, but her voice was steady. Mother was always on edge, especially about Elsie. She didn't like how the boys clung to her, called her Mummy once, and Mother heard. It set her off. But that was weeks before. The day she died, I didn't see much. I was out walking, like I told you. Jerry sensed a wall in her words, a careful omission. "Agnes saw your mother arguing with Elsie that morning. She thought it was serious. Did you know about that?" Megan's step faltered, her eyes flicking to his. "No, I mean, they argued sometimes. Elsie wanted more say in the house, and Mother wouldn't have it. But I didn't see anything that day." Her voice cracked and she looked away. "Why does it matter? They're both dead now." "It matters because Agnes was killed for what she knew," Jerry said gently. "If there's anything you're holding back, Megan, it could help stop this." Megan's eyes filled with tears, but she shook her head. "I don't know anything. I wish I did. Just leave me alone, please." She hurried off, her basket banging against her hip, leaving Jerry with a sinking feeling. Megan was frightened, but of what or whom? Determined to follow Miss Marple's advice, Jerry turned his attention to Dick Simington's death. He visited the village library, a cramped room above the post office, where Miss Barton, an elderly volunteer with a penchant for local history, kept meticulous records. Her hearing was poor, but her memory was sharp, and she welcomed Jerry with a cup of watery tea. "Dick Simington, you say?" she mused, adjusting her spectacles. "Tragic business. Died 3 years ago. Heart attack, poor man. He was a solicitor, well respected, though a bit stern. Left Maud and the children comfortable, I believe. House, investments, that sort of thing. There was talk he'd made a new will just before, but I don't know details. You'd need to ask Mr. Pye. He handled the estate." Jerry's interest sharpened. "A new will? Any rumours about what was in it?" Miss Barton frowned, her hands smoothing a ledger. "Nothing clear. Some said he favoured Megan, his daughter from his first marriage, but Maud wouldn't have liked that. She was fierce about her boys. Mind you, it's just gossip. After he died, Maud took charge, and no one questioned it." She leaned closer, her voice dropping. "Between you and me, Mr. Burton, there was talk of strain in that marriage. Dick was fond of Elsie Holland, hired her himself. Nothing improper, but Maud was a jealous sort. Jerry thanked her, his mind buzzing. A new will, family tensions, Elsie's role. It was a tangle of motives, and the letters seemed designed to obscure it. He sought out Mr. Pye at Netherby Hall, finding him in his garden, fussing over a rose-bush. Pye's welcome was effusive, but his eyes were wary, and Jerry sensed the strain of the latest letter still lingered. "Mr. Burton, what a delight," Pye said, brushing dirt from his hands. "Though I suspect this isn't a social call. The letters, I presume." Jerry nodded, wasting no time. "I'm looking into Dick Simington's death. Miss Barton mentioned a new will. You handled it. What can you tell me?" Pye's smile tightened, and he gestured to a bench. "You're thorough, aren't you?" "Yes, I managed Dick's estate. He died suddenly, heart attack as you know. His will left most of his assets to Maud, with trusts for the boys and a small legacy for Megan. There was an earlier draft, favouring Megan more heavily, but he changed it a year before his death. Maud was particular about the boys' future." Jerry's pulse quickened. "Did Megan know about the earlier will?" Pye shrugged, his fingers twisting a leaf. "Possibly. She was young, though, and Dick wasn't one to share such things. After his death, Maud took control, and Megan never contested it. Why do you ask? Surely you don't think this connects to the letters?" "I'm not sure," Jerry said, keeping his tone neutral. "But Mrs. Simington's death, Agnes's murder, it's all tied to that household, and the letters seem to know too much about private matters." Pye's eyes gleamed with interest. "You suspect a family secret, don't you? Well, I'll tell you this. Dick's death was a shock, but not entirely unexpected. He worked too hard, drank too much. And Maud, she was a proud woman, not one to forgive slights. If there's a motive, look there." He paused, then added, "But be discreet, Mr. Burton. Lymstock's a small place, and walls have ears." Jerry left Netherby Hall with a clearer picture of the Simington family's fractures. Dick's will, Elsie's presence, Maud's jealousy. It was a volatile mix, and the letters were fanning the flames. That evening he and Joanna dined alone, the fire crackling in the grate as they dissected the day's findings. "Money and resentment," Joanna said, swirling her wine. "That's what it comes down to, isn't it? Maud controlled the purse, strings, and Megan got the short end. Maybe the letters were meant to stir that up, or cover something else." Jerry nodded, his thoughts drifting to Miss Marple's advice about motive. "I need to talk to Elsie again, but she's shutting down, and Owen's hiding something about the cyanide. I'm going to the police tomorrow. Graves might have new leads." The next morning, Jerry visited the police station, a squat building off the high street. Inspector Graves was buried in paperwork, his face etched with fatigue. "Burton," he said, waving him to a chair. "You're persistent. Got something for me?" Jerry shared what he'd learned about the will and Elsie's argument with Mrs. Simington, careful to frame it as hearsay. Graves listened, his pen scratching notes. "Interesting," he said. "We've been digging into the cyanide. Owen's. Right, it's from his surgery. No fingerprints on the cabinet, but it was jimmied open, subtle-like. Someone knew what they were after." Jerry's heart sank. "Any suspects?" Graves leaned back, his eyes shrewd. "We're watching a few. Elsie Holland's on the list. That letter accusing her raised eyebrows. And Megan's been acting odd, according to neighbours. But we've no hard evidence. The typewriters, our best bet. But the Women's Institute is a sieve. Too many come and go. Jerry left, frustrated but determined. That afternoon, he sought out Miss Marple, finding her at the vicarage, sipping tea with Mrs. Dane Calthrop. The vicar's wife was in full tirade about the letters, but Miss Marple's calm presence drew Jerry's focus. He recounted his findings: Dick's, Will, Elsie's evasions, the cyanide theft, watching her closely. Miss Marple set her cup down, her eyes thoughtful. "You've done well, Mr. Burton. A will can be a powerful motive, especially when it shifts fortunes. And Miss Holland, her role in that house is delicate, isn't it? A governess, yet almost a rival to Mrs. Simington. As for the cyanide, its theft suggests planning, not impulse. I wonder, have you considered who might benefit from both deaths? Mrs. Simington's and Agnes's, Jerry frowned. Benefit? The boys inherit, I suppose, through Maud. Megan gets little, unless the old will surfaces. Elsie. She's just the governess, no stake in the estate. Miss Marple's smile was faint but knowing. People's stakes aren't always in money, Mr. Burton. Love, loyalty, fear, they can drive us strongly. In my village, a young man killed to protect a secret, not a fortune. Look at the household's heart. Who stood to gain peace or power or safety? And watch Miss Holland. She's in the thick of it, whether she knows it or not. Her words sparked a new angle, and Jerry returned to Little Furze with a plan. He'd shadow Elsie, observe her routines, and press Megan for more. The letters were a fog, as Miss Marple said, but the truth was there, hidden in the Simington house's shadows. As night fell, a fresh letter arrived at Little Furze, accusing Jerry of meddling in village affairs. He burned it, but its words lingered, a warning that the poison pen was watching, and its next move was near. Chapter 8. A Trap is Set. The sun rose over Lymstock with a deceptive warmth, its golden light failing to pierce the chill of suspicion that now gripped the village. At Little Furze, Jerry Burton paced the study, his notebook open to a page scrawled with fragments of the case: Dick Simington's will, Elsie Holland's evasions, the stolen cyanide, and Agnes Waddell's fatal knowledge. The latest anonymous letter, burned the previous night, had accused him of stirring trouble, a sign the writer was aware of his probing. The realization sharpened his resolve, but also his caution. Lymstock's poison pen was not just malicious, but dangerous. Joanna entered, her hair still damp from a morning walk, a newspaper tucked under her arm. "You're up early," she said, tossing the paper onto the desk. "Any breakthroughs, Sherlock?" Jerry stopped pacing, his eyes fixed on the notebook. "Not yet, but I'm close. Elsie's hiding something about that row with Mrs. Simington, and Megan's too scared to talk. The cyanide theft points to someone with access to Owen's surgery, and Dick's will suggests a motive tied to money or control. Miss Marple's right. It's about who benefits, and I think the answer's in the Simington house." Joanna nodded, her usual levity subdued. "What's the next step? You can't keep badgering Elsie. She'll clam up for good. And Megan's a wreck. Maybe it's time to shake things up." Jerry's mind turned to Miss Marple's advice about piercing the fog of the letters. "We need to force the writer's hand," he said. "If we can make them think we're closing in, they might slip. I'm going to talk to Inspector Graves. See if we can spread a rumour that the typewriter's been traced. It might panic the culprit into action." Joanna's eyes lit up. "A trap? I like it. But you'll need to be subtle. Lymstock's a gossip mill. One wrong word, and the whole village will know." Their plan took shape over breakfast, and Jerry set out for the police station, the village stirring with cautious life. The high street bore scars of the recent turmoil. Shutters stayed closed longer, and conversations hushed as he passed. At the bakery, Mrs. Cleet served him with a curt nod, her eyes darting to a new letter pinned behind the counter, accusing her of shortchanging customers. The village's patience was fraying, and Jerry sensed a reckoning was near. Inspector Graves was at his desk, surrounded by reports, his face etched with the strain of a case that refused to crack. "Burton," he said, waving him to a chair. "You're a regular now. Got something new?" Jerry leaned forward, keeping his voice low. "I've been thinking about the typewriter at the Women's Institute. If we let slip that you've found evidence, say fingerprints or a unique key mark, it might spook the writer. They could try to destroy it or make a mistake. Can you arrange it?" Graves rubbed his chin, his eyes narrowing. "A long shot, but worth a try. We've got nothing solid otherwise. I'll have my sergeant mention it at the pub tonight. Casual, like it's leaked. But if this backfires, Burton, it's on you. The village is a tinderbox," Jerry agreed, aware of the risk. He left the station and headed for the Simington cottage, determined to press Elsie and Megan before the trap was sprung. The cottage loomed at the end of the lane, its ivy-clad walls hiding secrets he was desperate to uncover. Elsie answered the door, her golden curls pinned tightly, her smile forced. "Mr. Burton," she said, stepping aside, "this is unexpected." "I won't keep you long," Jerry said, following her to the parlour. The room was tidy but oppressive, its air thick with unspoken tension. "I need to talk about the day Mrs. Simington died. Agnes saw you arguing with her. Something serious. What was it about?" Elsie's hands twisted in her apron, her eyes darting to the stairs. "I've told you. It was nothing. Just a disagreement about the boys' lessons. Mrs. Simington was particular. That's all." Jerry stepped closer, his tone firm. "Agnes thought it was more than that. She was scared, Elsie, and now she's dead. If you know something, you need to tell me. For your own sake." Elsie's face paled, her voice trembling. "I don't know anything. It was just a spat. She was upset, said I was overstepping. I told her I only wanted to help, and she said I'd regret it. But that's all, I swear." Her eyes filled with tears, and she turned away, her shoulders shaking. Jerry's instincts screamed she was holding back, but pushing further risked breaking her. "All right," he said gently, "but if you remember anything, come to me or the police. This isn't over." He glanced around, hoping to spot Megan, but the house was silent. "Is Megan here?" "She's out," Elsie said quickly. "At the library, I think. She's been keeping to herself." Jerry left, frustrated but undeterred. He headed for the library, a cramped room where Miss Barton was sorting books, her spectacles slipping down her nose. Megan was there, curled in a corner with a novel, her face drawn. She looked up as Jerry approached, her eyes wary but softer than before. "Megan," he said, sitting nearby, "I know you're hurting, but I need your help. The letters, your mother's death. Agnes, someone's behind this, and I think you know more than you're saying. Please, tell me." Megan's fingers tightened on the book, her knuckles white. "I've told you everything. Mother was unhappy, but she didn't talk to me. I don't know why she'd do that." Her voice broke and she looked down. "But there's something. I found a letter in her room after she died, not the one they found. It was hidden in her desk. It wasn't typed, just handwritten, but it looked old. I didn't read it all, just saw a name, Dix. Then it was gone." Jerry's heart raced. "Gone? When?" "The next day," Megan said, her voice barely audible. "I went to look again, but it wasn't there. I didn't tell anyone. I was scared. What if it meant something?" Jerry leaned closer, his mind whirring. "Did you tell Elsie?" Megan shook her head. "No, she's been so strange, always watching me. I thought maybe she took it." Her eyes met his, pleading. "Don't tell her I said that, please." Jerry promised, his thoughts spinning. A hidden letter mentioning Dick Simington, stolen after Mrs. Simington's death. It was a new piece of the puzzle, and it pointed to the household's past. He thanked Megan and left, his resolve hardening. The trap with the typewriter was in motion, but he needed to act fast. That afternoon, he visited Mrs. Dane Calthrop at the vicarage, hoping to consult Miss Marple. The vicar's wife was in a state, brandishing a fresh letter accusing her of spreading lies about the church. "It's outrageous," she fumed, tossing it onto the table. "I'm going to the Women's Institute myself and guarding that typewriter until someone confesses." Miss Marple, seated by the window with her knitting, looked up, her eyes sharp. "A bold plan, Maud, but perhaps unwise. The writer is cunning, and danger follows them. Mr. Burton, you seem troubled. What's happened?" Jerry recounted Megan's revelation about the hidden letter and his plan with Graves to flush out the writer. Miss Marple listened, her needles pausing. "A handwritten letter," she mused. "That's significant. It suggests a personal connection, perhaps to Mr. Simington's death. And your trap is clever, but risky. The writer is watching, Mr. Burton, and they've killed to protect their secret. If they act, it will be swift." Her warning sent a chill through him, but Jerry pressed on. "Who do you think benefits, Miss Marple? The boys inherit, but their children. Megan's out of the will, and Elsie's just the governess. Could it be someone outside the family?" Miss Marple's smile was faint. "Benefit isn't always money, Mr. Burton. Control, freedom, revenge, these can be motives too. In my village, a woman killed to escape a tyrant, not for gain. Look at the household's dynamics, who gained peace or power by Mrs. Simington's death. And Agnes, her knowledge threatened someone close. Miss Holland, perhaps, or even Miss Megan, though she seems fragile. Keep your eyes open tonight." That evening, as the village settled into dusk, Jerry and Joanna dined quietly. Gierschner, air thick with anticipation. Graves's sergeant had spread the rumour at the pub, and whispers of a breakthrough were already circulating. Jerry's nerves were taut, his mind replaying Miss Marple's words. At 10 o'clock, a sharp cry shattered the silence. A shout from the high street, followed by the clang of bells. Jerry grabbed his stick and ran, Joanna close behind. The Women's Institute was ablaze, flames licking the windows, smoke billowing into the night. Villagers gathered shouting as Mr. Pye, in a dressing gown, tried to organise a bucket brigade. Inspector Graves arrived, his face grim, barking. Orders to keep the crowd back. The typewriter, Jerry muttered, his heart sinking. They've destroyed it. Graves nodded, his eyes scanning the scene. Looks like arson. Someone doused the office with petrol and lit a match. Your rumour worked, Burton. They panicked. But we've lost our best evidence. As the fire was contained, Jerry spotted Elsie in the crowd, her face pale, her hands clutching her coat. Nearby, Owen Griffith stood, his expression unreadable, and Mrs. Dane Calthrop was shouting about justice. Megan was absent, and Jerry wondered if her absence meant guilt or fear. Back at Little Furze, Jerry and Joanna sat by the fire, the night's events heavy between them. "The writer's desperate," Joanna said, her voice low. "They risked everything to destroy that typewriter, but it proves we're close, doesn't it?" Jerry nodded, his mind racing. "Too close. The hidden letter Megan found. It's the key. It's tied to Dick Simington, and someone wanted it gone. Elsie's my bet. She's been terrified since Agnes died, but I need proof." Joanna's eyes gleamed. "Then we keep pushing. The writers made a mistake tonight. They'll make another," Jerry agreed, but Miss Marple's warning echoed. A cornered creature was dangerous. The fire had destroyed evidence, but it had also lit a path. The Simington household held the truth, and Jerry was determined to find it, even if it meant facing the poison pen's wrath. Chapter 9. Miss Marple's Theory. The acrid scent of smoke lingered in Lymstock's air, a grim reminder of the fire that had gutted the Women's Institute the previous night. At Little Furze, Jerry Burton sat in the study, his notebook open but untouched, his mind churning over the arson's implications. The typewriter, their best link to the anonymous letter writer, was destroyed, and with it any hope of tracing fingerprints or key marks. Yet the act itself was a revelation. The writer was desperate. Cornered by the rumour Jerry and Inspector Graves had spread. The trap had worked, but at a cost, and Jerry felt the weight of a case growing darker by the day. Joanna entered, her face pale from a sleepless night, a tray of tea in her hands. "You look like you've been up all night," she said, setting the tray down. "Any grand insights about our firebug?" Jerry rubbed his eyes, his voice low. "The fire proves we're close. Whoever set it knew the typewriter could expose them. But it's also a dead end. Graves says the machines melted to slag. We're back to the Simington house. Megan's hidden letter, Elsie's fear, the cyanide theft. It's all there." Joanna poured tea, her movements brisk. "Elsie's my bet. She's been a nervous wreck since Agnes died, and that row with Mrs. Simington keeps coming up. But Megan's not innocent either. She found that letter and didn't tell anyone. What if she's playing us?" Jerry shook his head. "Megan's scared, not cunning. That letter about Dick Simington, it's the key. If we could find it, or figure out who took it, we'd have our motive. I'm going to the vicarage today. Miss Marple sees things we don't. She might point us in the right direction." Joanna's lips quirked. "That old lady's got you wrapped around her finger. But you're right, she's uncanny. Just watch your step, Jerry. The writer's killed twice. They won't stop now." Her warning echoed as Jerry set out. The village hushed under a leaden sky. The high street bore the fire's aftermath. Charred debris littered the pavement near the institute, and villagers clustered in knots, their voices low with fear and speculation. At the post office, Mrs. Mudge was sorting mail with a scowl, muttering about a new letter accusing the milkman of watering his wares. The poison pen's reach seemed boundless, and Jerry felt a surge of urgency to end its reign. At the vicarage, Mrs. Dane Calthrop greeted him with her usual fervour, her tweed jacket askew. "Burton, you're a sight for sore eyes," she said, ushering him into the drawing-room. "This village is falling apart, and that fire's the last straw. Jane's been saying it's all connected, but she won't explain until she's ready. Maddening woman." Miss Marple sat by the fire, her knitting a soft blur, her eyes bright with quiet intensity. She smiled as Jerry entered, gesturing to a chair. "Mr. Burton, you've been busy." The fire was quite a development, wasn't it? A bold move and a revealing one. Jerry sat, his stick resting against his knee. It was our trap. Graves spread a rumour about the typewriter, and someone panicked. But we've lost the evidence, and I'm no closer to the truth. I need your help, Miss Marple. Megan found a handwritten letter in her mother's room, mentioning Dick Simington. It was stolen, and Elsie's acting like she's hiding something. What am I missing? Miss Marple's needles paused, her gaze thoughtful. You're missing very little, Mr. Burton, but the pieces are scattered. Let's gather them. Mrs. Simington's death, Agnes's murder, the letters, the fire, they're all part of a single design. The letters are a fog, as I've said, meant to obscure a specific act. That act, I believe, is Mrs. Simington's murder. Jerry's breath caught. Murder. The coroner ruled suicide, cyanide, the letter. Miss Marple's smile was faint but sharp. Suicide is a convenient verdict, isn't it? Especially when a letter provides the motive. But consider, cyanide is not easily obtained, yet it was stolen from Dr. Griffith's surgery. The letter was perfectly timed, and Mrs. Simington's death silenced her at a critical moment. Agnes, who saw something that day, was killed to ensure her silence. And now the typewriter is gone, destroyed to protect the writer. This is no spree of malice, Mr. Burton. It's a calculated plan. Joanna, who had slipped in quietly, leaned forward. But why? Who benefits? The boys get the estate, but they're kids. Megan's out of the will, and Elsie's just the governess. Miss Marple resumed knitting, her voice calm but weighted. Benefit is a broad term, Miss Burton. Money is one motive, but so is control, or freedom, or vengeance. In my village, a man killed his wife to escape her dominance, not for wealth. Mrs. Simington was a strong figure, wasn't she? Her death shifted the household's balance. And Agnes's death suggests she saw something that threatened the killer. Something tied to that argument with Miss Holland. Jerry's mind raced. Elsie's been terrified since Agnes died, and Megan said the hidden letter mentioned Dick Simington. Could it be about the will, or something else? Miss Marple's eyes gleamed. The letter is crucial. If it was handwritten, it's personal, not part of the anonymous campaign. It may reveal a secret Mrs. Simington kept, a secret worth killing for. As for Miss Holland, her role is ambiguous. A governess, yet close to the family, perhaps too close. She's frightened, you say. That could mean guilt, or it could mean she knows too much. I'd suggest you look at the household's past, Mr. Burton. Dick Simington's death, his will, his relationships, what did they leave behind? Mrs. Dane Calthrop, who had been pacing, burst in. "Jane, you're talking in riddles. Just tell us who it is." Miss Marple chuckled softly. "Patience, Maud. The truth requires evidence, not guesses. Mr. Burton, I propose we gather the key players, Miss Holland, Miss Megan, Dr. Griffith, perhaps Mr. Pye, and discuss the case openly. Sometimes a direct approach shakes loose the truth." Jerry hesitated, then nodded. "All right. Tonight, at the vicarage, I'll get Graves to come. He'll want to hear this." The plan was set, and Jerry spent the afternoon tracking down the others. Elsie agreed reluctantly, her eyes darting nervously. Megan, found at the cottage, seemed resigned, her grief heavy, but her curiosity piqued. Owen Griffith was at his surgery, his manner brusque but cooperative, and Mr. Pye, delighted by the drama, promised to bring his keen eye. Inspector Graves, when Jerry called at the station, was sceptical, but agreed, sensing a chance to break the case. That evening, the vicarage. Drawing-room was a study in tension. The fire crackled, casting shadows on the faded wallpaper, and the air was thick with anticipation. Mrs. Dane Calthrop played hostess, her energy barely contained, while Miss Marple sat quietly, her knitting a steady rhythm. Jerry and Joanna took seats near the door, watching as the others arrived. Elsie, pale and fidgeting, Megan, withdrawn but alert, Owen, his face guarded, Pye, his silk scarf a splash of defiance, and Graves, notebook in hand, his eyes scanning. "The room," Miss Marple began, her voice clear and measured. "Thank you all for coming. Lymstock has suffered greatly. 2 deaths, countless letters, and now a fire. These are not random acts, but a chain, linked by a single purpose. I believe Mrs. Simington was murdered, her death staged as suicide to hide a deeper motive. Agnes Waddell was killed because she saw something that day, something that threatened the killer. The letters are a distraction, designed to sow chaos and obscure the truth." Elsie gasped, her hands twisting. "Murder! But the letter! She took her own life. The police said so." Graves nodded. "The evidence pointed to suicide. Cyanide, the letter, her state of mind. But we're open to new theories. Miss Marple, what's your proof?" Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. "Proof comes from patterns, Inspector. The cyanide was stolen, not purchased, suggesting planning. The letter was conveniently damning, yet vague, like all the others. And Agnes's murder, bludgeoned, not poisoned, shows a killer desperate to silence her. She saw an argument between Mrs. Simington and Miss Holland. What was it about Miss Holland?" Elsie's face crumpled, her voice barely audible. "It was nothing, just a silly row about the boys. She thought I was too soft with them. I told her I meant no harm, and she got angry, said I'd regret crossing her. That's all." Megan's head snapped up, her eyes blazing. "That's not true. Mother didn't care about the boys. Lessons. She cared about you, Elsie. She thought you were after her place, acting like their mother. I heard her say so weeks before." Elsie flinched, her eyes filling with tears. "That's not fair. I only wanted to help. The boys needed someone. They were so lonely." Mrs. Simington was cold, always shutting them out. Owen shifted in his seat, his voice sharp. let's not sling accusations. Elsie's right. Maud was distant, especially with the boys. But that doesn't make Elsie a killer. Mr. Pye, his eyes gleaming, leaned forward. Oh, but it's fascinating, isn't it? A household divided, jealousy, resentment, a governess too close to the family. And those letters stirring the pot. I wonder, Miss Holland, did you ever receive one? Elsie's cheeks flushed. Yes, one, accusing me of poisoning her. It was lies like all of them. Miss Marple's voice cut through, calm but firm. Lies, yes, but with a purpose. The letters create mistrust, but they also point fingers. The one accusing you, Miss Holland, came after Agnes's death, perhaps to deflect suspicion or to frighten you. And Miss Megan, you found a letter, didn't you? A handwritten one, hidden in your mother's room. Megan's eyes widened, her voice trembling. How did you— Yes, I found it. It mentioned father, but it was gone the next day. I thought, maybe Elsie took it. Elsie stood, her voice shrill. I didn't. I never saw any letter. You're all ganging up on me. Graves raised a hand, his tone steady. Calm down, Miss Holland. No one's accusing you yet, but we need the truth. If you know anything about that letter or the row, now's the time. Elsie sank back, sobbing. I don't. I swear, I don't. Miss Marple's gaze softened, but her voice held steel. Someone in that house knows more. The letter about Dick Simington suggests a secret from the past, perhaps tied to his will or his relationships. Mrs. Simington's death gave someone freedom, or power, or safety, and Agnes's death protected that gain. I urge you all to think. Who stood to lose if Mrs. Simington lived? The room fell silent, the fire's crackle the only sound. Jerry watched the faces. Elsie's despair, Megan's fear, Owen's tension, Pye's curiosity, Graves's scrutiny. Miss Marple had laid bare the case's heart. But the killer remained hidden, their motive cloaked in the letter's fog. As the group dispersed, Jerry pulled Miss Marple aside. You've shaken them, he said, but we're still missing the link. Elsie's breaking, but is she guilty or just scared? Miss Marple's smile was enigmatic. She's scared, Mr. Burton, but fear can come from many places. Watch her closely, and Miss Megan too. The letter's theft is the key. Find who took it, and you'll find your killer. And be careful. The fire was a warning, and the next move may be bolder. Jerry returned to Little Furze, his mind alight with Miss Marple's theory. The Simington house was the crucible, its secrets fueling murder. Elsie, Megan, the boy's inheritance, Dick's past. Somewhere in that tangle lay the truth. As night fell, a new letter arrived accusing Joanna of prying into secrets that would destroy her. Jerry burned it, but its words lingered, a taunt from a killer who knew they were closing in. Chapter 10. The truth emerges. The dawn broke over Lymstock with a fragile clarity, the sky a pale wash of blue that belied the village's simmering unrest. At Little Furze, Jerry Burton sat in the study, the embers of last night's fire cold. In the grate, his notebook open to a page dense with connections and questions. Miss Marple's theory from the vicarage gathering had lit a fuse in his mind. Mrs. Simington's death was no suicide, but a murder, cloaked by the anonymous letters, to hide a motive rooted in the family's past. Agnes Waddle's killing. the stolen cyanide, the burned typewriter, and now Megan's revelation of a hidden letter mentioning Dick Simington, all pointed to a killer within the Simington household, their identity tantalizingly close, yet shrouded in the letter's fog. Joanna entered, her eyes shadowed from a restless night, a tray of toast and tea in her hands. "You're up early again," she said, setting the tray on the desk. "That meeting at the vicarage shook things up, didn't it? Elsie was practically falling apart, and Megan looked like she'd seen a ghost. What's your next move?" Jerry rubbed his temples, his voice low. "Miss Marple's right. It's murder, and the letters are a distraction. That handwritten letter Megan found is the key. It's tied to Dick Simington, maybe his will or something he left behind. Elsie's hiding something about her row with Mrs. Simington, and I think she knows about the letter. I'm going to confront her today. No dodging this time." Joanna's lips quirked, but her tone was serious. "Be careful, Jerry. Elsie's on edge, and if she's the killer, she's already got 2 deaths on her hands. And what about Megan? She held back about that letter for days. Could she be involved?" Jerry shook his head, though doubt lingered. Megan's scared, not calculating. But she's part of this, whether she knows it or not. I'll talk to her too, and I want to check the Simington house. There might be traces of that letter, or something else. Then I'll see Graves. Sure, fire bought the killer time, but they're slipping. Joanna poured tea, her eyes narrowing. What about Owen? He's been quiet since the cyanide theft came up. He had access, and he's protective of Elsie. Could he be covering for her? It's possible, Jerry admitted, his mind flashing to Owen's guarded demeanor. But his motive's thin. Professional ruin if he's caught, and no clear gain from Mrs. Simington's death. Still, I'll keep him in mind. For now, Elsie's the priority. Their planning was interrupted by a knock, and Mrs. Baker bustled in, her face flushed with fresh gossip. "Morning, sir, miss," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "Village is buzzing about that fire, and now there's another letter, slipped under Mrs. Mudge's door, accusing her of spreading lies about the vicar. Folk are saying it's a vendetta, and some are packing to leave. Never seen Lymstock so rattled." Jerry's stomach tightened. "Any leads on the fire? Did the police find anything?" Mrs. Baker shook her head. "Not a scrap, far as I know. The Institute's a ruin, and Inspector Graves is tearing his hair out. But I'll tell you this. People are pointing fingers at Elsie Holland. That letter, accusing her of poisoning Mrs. Simington's got tongues wagging." Joanna raised an eyebrow. "Elsie? Do they really think she's the killer?" Mrs. Baker snorted. "Some do, some don't. She's an outsider, see? Pretty, city ways too. Close to them boys. Makes folks suspicious. Mind you, I don't believe it myself. She's soft, not sly. She bustled out, muttering about locking her windows." Jerry exchanged a glance with Joanna. "Elsie's in the spotlight, and that's dangerous. If she's innocent, the real killer's using her as a scapegoat. I need to move fast." He set out for the Simington cottage, the village subdued under the morning's fragile light. The high street was nearly deserted, shop shutters half drawn, and the charred skeleton of the Women's Institute stood as a stark warning. At the grocer's, Jerry overheard a whisper. "Holland's got secrets, mark my words." Before the speaker fell silent, eyeing him warily. Lymstock was a village under siege, its trust eroded by fear. At the cottage, Elsie answered the door, her golden curls limp, her eyes red-rimmed. "Mr. Burton," she said, her voice brittle. I wasn't expecting you. It's not a good time." "I won't stay long," Jerry said, stepping inside before she could protest. The parlour was dim, its curtains drawn, and the air carried a faint mustiness, as if the house were holding its breath. "Elsie, we need to talk about the day Mrs. Simington died. Agnes saw you arguing with her, and it wasn't about the boys' lessons. What really happened?" Elsie's hands twisted in her skirt, her face paling. "I've told you. It was nothing serious. She was upset, thought I was too involved with Colin and Brian. I said I only cared about their happiness, and she took it wrong. That's all." Jerry's patience frayed, his tone sharpening. "Elsie, Agnes is dead because of what she saw. You're scared. I can see it. If you're protecting someone, or yourself, now's the time to come clean. What was the argument about? And what do you know about a handwritten letter Megan found, mentioning Dick Simington?" Elsie's eyes widened, her breath catching. "A letter? I don't know anything about that. Megan's imagining things. She's been so strange since her mother died. And the argument, it was personal, all right. Mrs. Simington accused me of being too close to Mr. Simington before he died. She thought I had designs on him. It was nonsense, but she wouldn't listen. She said I'd pay for it, and then she was dead. I didn't tell anyone because it sounded so ugly." Jerry's pulse quickened. "Too close to Dick Simington? Were you?" Elsie's cheeks flushed, her voice rising. "No, he was kind to me, that's all. He hired me, gave me a chance, when I needed it. Mrs. Simington was jealous, always watching me. But I never crossed a line, I swear it." She broke off, sobbing, her hands covering her face. Jerry studied her, torn between pity and suspicion. Her story rang true, but her fear suggested more. "All right, Elsie, but if you're holding back, it could cost you. The killer's still out there, and they're watching." He paused, then added, "Where's Megan? I need to see her." Elsie wiped her eyes, her voice unsteady. "She's upstairs, resting. She's not well, keeps to her room. Please, don't upset her." Jerry nodded, but his instincts urged him to act. He climbed the narrow staircase, the house's silence pressing in, and knocked softly on Megan's door. "Megan, it's Jerry Burton. Can we talk?" After a long pause, the door creaked open, revealing Megan, her face pale, her hair tangled. She looked older than her 20 years, her eyes hollow with grief and something else, dread, perhaps. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice flat. Jerry stepped inside, closing the door. The room was sparse, its single window overlooking the garden, and a faint scent of lavender lingered. "Megan, I know about the letter you found, the handwritten one about your father. You said it was stolen. I think it's why your mother and Agnes were killed. You have to tell me everything you remember." Megan's hands clenched, her gaze dropping. "I told you, it's gone. I only saw it for a moment. It was in Mother's desk, tucked in a book. It was old, the ink faded, and it mentioned Father. Something about a promise or a debt. I didn't read more. I was too shocked. When I went back, it was missing. I thought Elsie took it, but I don't know." Jerry's mind raced. A promise or a debt? To whom? Megan shook her head, her voice trembling. I couldn't tell. It was signed, but the name was smudged. I keep thinking, what if it was something Mother was hiding? Something that got her killed? Her eyes met his, pleading. I'm scared, Mr. Burton. I don't know who to trust. Jerry's heart ached for her, but he pressed on. Did you ever hear your mother talk about your father's death? Or the will? Anything that might connect? Megan hesitated, then nodded slowly. Once, a few months ago, she was angry. Said Father had tried to change things, to give me more. She said it wasn't fair to the boys, that she'd fixed it. I didn't understand, but she was fierce. Like she'd won something. Jerry's pulse surged. Maud Simington had altered the will's outcome, ensuring her son's inheritance over Megan's. The hidden letter could be evidence of Dick's intentions, a threat to her control. Thank you, Megan, he said gently. Stay here and don't tell anyone we spoke. I'll sort this out. He left the cottage, his thoughts a whirlwind. Elsie's admission about Dick Simington, Megan's story of the letter and the will, it was a puzzle coming together, but the killer's face remained hidden. He headed for the police station, finding Inspector Graves in a foul mood, his desk littered with reports on the fire. Burton, Graves growled, your rumour cost us the typewriter, and we've got nothing from the ashes. Petrol, a match, clean, job. What have you got now? Jerry shared Elsie's confession about the argument and Megan's account of the letter, keeping Megan's confidence where he could. It's about the Simington family's past, he said. Dick's will, or a secret he left behind. Elsie's scared, and Megan's in over her head. The killer's someone close, someone who needed Mrs. Simington gone. Graves leaned back, his eyes shrewd. Holland's looking shakier by the day. That row, and now this talk of a letter. We're watching her, but we need evidence. I'm pulling in Owen Griffith too. His cyanide's at the heart of this. Keep digging, Burton, but stay out of my way. Jerry left. His next stop the vicarage, where he hoped Miss Marple could refine his thinking. Mrs. Dane Calthrop was out, but Miss Marple welcomed him in the garden, her pruning shears glinting as she trimmed a rosebush. Mr. Burton, she said, her eyes bright, you've been busy. Tell me, what have you found? Jerry recounted Elsie's story of the argument, Megan's hidden letter, and the will's shift. It's about control, he said. Maud Simington secured the boy's future, but Dick's letter might have threatened that. Elsie's terrified, but I don't think she's the killer. She's too rattled. Miss Marple set her shears down, her voice thoughtful. You're very close, Mr. Burton. The letter is indeed the key. A link to Dick Simington's intentions, perhaps a promise to Megan, or a debt unpaid. Mrs. Simington's death ensured its secret stayed buried, and Agnes's murder sealed. Miss Holland is a piece of the puzzle, but not the whole. Consider this. Who had the most to lose if Mrs. Simington lived and that letter surfaced? Not just money, but power or safety? Jerry frowned, his mind turning. The boy's inheritance is secure with Maud gone. Megan gains nothing, unless the letter changes the will. Elsie, she's got no stake, unless she's protecting someone. Sir Marple's smile was faint. Or unless she's caught in a web not of her making. In my village, a young woman died because she knew a secret. But the killer was someone unexpected, a figure trusted by all. Look at the household's heart. Mr. Burton, Who gained freedom by Mrs. Simington's death? And who could move unseen, writing letters to mask their act? Her words sparked a new angle, and Jerry returned to Little Furze, his resolve hardening. That evening, he and Joanna brainstormed, the fire casting shadows on the walls. "It's someone in the house," Joanna said, her voice low. "Elsie's too obvious and Megan's too broken. Could it be Owen covering for Elsie? Or what about the boys? They're young, but they're tied to the money." Jerry shook his head. "They're kids, Joe, but the money's the motive, I'm sure. That letter, it's proof of something Dick wanted, something Maud buried. I need to search the cottage, find any trace of it." The next morning, a fresh letter arrived, accusing Jerry of digging into secrets that would ruin him. He burned it, but its threat fueled his urgency. He slipped into the Simington cottage while Elsie was at the market, Megan at the library, and the boys at school. The parlour was silent, its air heavy with secrets. In Mrs. Simington's desk, he found only bills and correspondence. But in a locked drawer, forced open with a letter opener, he found a scrap of paper, its edge torn with faded ink. "Promise to Megan, my duty." The rest was gone, but it was enough. Jerry's heart pounded. The letter existed, and someone had tried to erase it. He pocketed the scrap and left, his mind racing. At the vicarage, he showed it to Miss Marple, who nodded, her eyes gleaming. "You've found the thread, Mr. Burton. This is Dick Simington's hand, I'd wager. A promise to his daughter, thwarted by his wife. The killer feared its discovery. Now, you must lay the trap again, not with rumours, but with truth. Confront the household and watch their eyes." Jerry agreed, his path clear. The Simington house held the killer, and the scrap of paper was his weapon. As dusk fell, Lymstock seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the poison pen's final strike. Chapter 11. The Final Confrontation. The twilight over Lymstock was heavy with foreboding, the village's quaint charm eclipsed by a tension that seemed to pulse in the air. At Little Furze, Jerry Burton stood by the study window, the scrap of paper he'd found in Mrs. Simington's desk clutched in his hand. Its faded words. "Promise to Megan, my duty," were a beacon, illuminating a motive rooted in Dick Simington's thwarted intentions. Miss Marple's counsel to confront the Simington household with this truth rang in his ears, urging him to act before the poison pen struck again. The killer, cornered by the fire at the Women's Institute and the mounting suspicions, was desperate, and Jerry knew the next move could be deadly. Joanna entered, her face taut with anticipation, a fresh pot of tea in her hands. "You're staring at that scrap like it's going to speak," she said, setting the pot down. "What's the plan, Jerry? That paper's dynamite, but you can't just wave it at Elsie and expect a confession." Jerry turned, his jaw set. Miss Marple said to confront them. Elsie, Megan, anyone's in that house. The letter's proof Dick wanted something for Megan, something Maud buried. The killer killed to keep it hidden, and Agnes died because she saw too much. "I'm going to the cottage tonight with Graves if I can get him. We'll lay it all out and watch their reactions." Joanna's eyes narrowed. "It's risky. Elsie's a wreck, and Megan's unpredictable. What if the killer's someone else? Owen, or even Mr. Pye? That scrap doesn't name them. Jerry nodded, his mind racing. Owen's a possibility. He had access to the cyanide, and he's protective of Elsie. Pye's too theatrical, but he knows the family's secrets. Still, the Simington house is the heart of this. The letter was there, and so was the motive. I'll start with Elsie and Megan, then bring in the others if I have to. Their discussion was cut short by a knock, and Mrs. Baker bustled in, her apron askew, her face alight with village gossip. "Oh, sir, it's a madhouse out there," she said, wiping her brow. Another letter's turned up, at the vicarage no less, accusing Mrs. Dane Calthrop of plotting against the church. She's fit to be tied, says she'll hunt the writer, herself. And folk are whispering about Elsie Holland, say she's been seen sneaking about at night, looking scared. Jerry's pulse quickened. Sneaking about? Where? Mrs. Baker shrugged. Near the mill, some say, where poor Agnes was found. Could be nonsense, but with that letter accusing her of poisoning Mrs. Simington, people are talking. Mind you, I think it's just fear driving her. She bustled out, muttering about cursed times. Joanna poured tea, her voice low. Elsie sneaking around, that's new. If she's guilty, she might be covering tracks. If she's not, she's terrified of something or someone. You'd better move fast, Jerry. Jerry agreed, his resolve hardening. He headed for the police station, the village shrouded in a dusk that felt oppressive. The high street was nearly empty, its shops shuttered early, and the charred ruins of the Women's Institute loomed like a warning. At the grocer's, a knot of villagers fell silent as he passed, their eyes glinting with suspicion. Lymstock was a village on edge, its secrets festering in the shadows. Inspector Graves was at his desk, his face haggard, a stack of reports before him. "Burton," he said, his tone weary, "you're like a bad penny. What now?" Jerry pulled out the scrap of paper, laying it on the desk. This was in Mrs. Simington's desk, a piece of a letter from Dick Simington, mentioning a promise to Megan. It's why Maud was killed, and Agnes too. The anonymous letters were a cover to hide this. I want to confront the Simington household tonight. Elsie, Megan, anyone there. Will you come? Graves studied the scrap, his eyes narrowing. This changes things. A promise to Megan. Could be about the will or something else. Holland's looking shakier, especially with talk of her skulking about. I'll come, but we do this my way. No heroics, Burton. The killer's desperate, and I don't want another body. Jerry nodded, relieved to have Graves's backing. They agreed to meet at the Simington cottage at 7, giving Jerry time to consult Miss Marple. One last time. He found her at the vicarage, seated in the drawing room with a cup of tea, her knitting idle for once. Mrs. Dane Calthrop was absent, and the quiet allowed Jerry to lay out his plan without interruption. Miss Marple, he began, showing her the scrap. This is what Megan found, or part of it. Dick Simington's words about a duty to Megan. I think Maud suppressed it to protect her boy's inheritance, and someone killed her to keep it buried. I'm confronting Elsie and Megan. Tonight, with Graves. What am I missing? Miss Marple's eyes gleamed as she examined the paper, her voice soft but precise. You're very close, Mr. Burton. This letter is the heart of it. A promise, perhaps to secure Megan's future, thwarted by Mrs. Simington's control. Her death ensured the secret stayed hidden, and Agnes's murder sealed it. But consider the killer's mind. They've orchestrated a campaign of letters, stolen cyanide, set afire, all to protect their gain. Such cunning requires intimacy with the household and a stake in its future. Miss Holland is frightened, but is she the mastermind or a pawn? And Miss Megan, her grief is real, but grief can mask other truths. Jerry frowned, his thoughts swirling. You think Megan could be involved? She's so broken. Miss Marple's smile was faint. Broken, yes, but people are complex, Mr. Burton. In my village, a young girl killed to escape a life of neglect, her pain hidden behind tears. Look at the household's dynamics. Who gained not just money, but freedom or vengeance? And watch, Miss Holland's fear. It may lead you to the truth or away from it. Tonight, trust your instincts, but be ready for a surprise. Her words settled like a weight, and Jerry left the vicarage with a mix of clarity and unease. At 7, he and Graves arrived at the Simington cottage, the house's windows glowing faintly in the dusk. Elsie opened the door, her face ashen, her hands trembling. "Mr. Burton, Inspector," she said, her voice barely audible. "What's this about?" Graves took charge, his tone firm. "We need to talk, Miss Holland. Is Miss Megan here, and the boys?" Elsie nodded, leading them to the parlour. "Megan's upstairs. The boys are with a neighbour. I'll fetch her." She hesitated, then hurried off, her footsteps echoing in the silent house. The parlour was cold, its furniture draped in shadows, and Jerry felt a prickle of anticipation. Megan appeared, her eyes red-rimmed, her hair pulled back severely. She sat across from them, her hands clasped tightly, while Elsie hovered near the door, her gaze darting between them. Graves began, his notebook open. "We're here about Mrs. Simington's death and Agnes Waddles. New evidence suggests Mrs. Simington was murdered, not a suicide, and the letters were a cover. We've found this." He held up the scrap of paper, its words stark in the lamplight. "A letter from Dick Simington about a promise to Megan. Someone killed to keep it hidden. Who was it?" Elsie gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "A letter! I told you, I never saw it. Megan, you said it was gone." Megan's face crumpled, her voice shaking. "It was! I found it in Mother's desk, but it disappeared. I thought, you took it, Elsie. You were always in her room." Elsie's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't. I swear, I didn't touch it. Mrs. Simington was cruel to me, yes, but I'd never hurt her. She thought I wanted Mr. Simington, but it wasn't true. I only cared for the boys." Jerry leaned forward, his voice steady. "Elsie, you argued with her that day. Agnes saw it, and now she's dead. What was it really about? And what do you know about Dick Simington's plans for Megan?" Elsie sank into a chair, sobbing. "It was about the boys, and yes, about Mr. Simington. She accused me of seducing him years ago. I admitted I cared for him, but it was never what she thought. He was kind, that's all. And he told me once, before he died, that he wanted Megan to have more. Said he'd made a mistake with the will. Mrs. Simington found out, and she hated me for it. That's what we fought about. She said I'd poisoned his mind against her." Graves's pen scratched furiously, his eyes sharp. "And the letter? Did you take it?" "No!" Elsie cried. "I never saw it. I didn't even know it existed until Megan said so." Megan's voice cut through, sharp with anger. "Then who did? Someone took it, Elsie, and Mother's dead. Because of it." Jerry's mind raced, Miss Marple's words echoing. Who gained freedom or vengeance? Elsie's story fit, but her despair seemed genuine. Megan's grief was raw, but her silence about the letter had delayed the truth. And the boys, though absent, loomed as heirs. He turned to Graves, his voice low. "We need to search the house again now. If that letter's here, or any trace of it, we'll find the killer." Graves nodded, signalling to a constable who'd arrived with him. "Miss Holland, Miss Megan, stay here. Burton, you're with me." They moved swiftly, starting with Mrs. Simington's bedroom, its air heavy with the scent of lavender. The desk yielded nothing new, but in a wardrobe, hidden behind a stack of linens, Jerry found a locked box, its hinges rusted. Graves pried it open, revealing a bundle of papers, bills, receipts, and tucked at the bottom a folded sheet in Dick Simington's hand. The ink was faded, but the words were clear. "My duty to Megan is clear. The will must reflect her share. Despite Maud's objections, I trust Elsie to ensure this, should I fail." Jerry's heart pounded. This is it, the promise. Dick wanted Megan to inherit, and Elsie knew. Maud suppressed it, and someone killed to keep it buried. Graves's face hardened. Holland's in deep. She had motive, resentment, maybe loyalty to Dick. Let's bring her in. Back in the parlour, Elsie's sobs had subsided, but her face was a mask of fear. Graves held up the letter, his voice cold. "Miss Holland, this is Dick Simington's letter, found in this house. It names you as guardian of his wishes for Megan. Did you kill Mrs. Simington to make it happen?" Elsie's scream echoed, her hands clawing at her hair. "No, I didn't. I knew he wanted Megan to have more, but I never saw that letter. Mrs. Simington was alive when I left her that day. I swear it." Megan stood, her voice trembling but fierce. "Then who, Elsie? Who took it? Who killed Mother?" Before Elsie could answer, a new voice cut through, sharp and commanding. "Enough!" The door swung open, and Mrs. Simington stepped into the room, her face pale but composed, her eyes blazing with defiance. The room froze, gasps echoing as Jerry and Graves stared, stunned. "Maud," Jerry whispered, his mind reeling. "You're alive?" Mrs. Simington's lips curled in a bitter smile. "Alive, yes, and tired of this charade. I staged my death, Mr. Burton, to protect my boys. That letter," she pointed to the paper in Graves's hand, "would have ruined them. Dick was weak, swayed by guilt over Megan. I couldn't let her take what's theirs." Graves recovered, his hand on his whistle. "Mrs. Simington, you're under arrest. Explain yourself, now." Maud stood tall, her voice steady. "I wrote the letters, all of them. They were a distraction, to keep the village guessing while I dealt with Dick's betrayal. I stole the cyanide, staged my suicide, and hid in the attic, slipping out at night. Agnes saw me that day, tampering with the glass. I had to silence her. The fire was my last move, to destroy the typewriter. But you, Mr. Burton, were too persistent." Megan's sob broke the silence, her voice raw. "Mother, you killed Agnes? You let me think you were dead." Maud's eyes softened, but her resolve held. "For Colin and Brian, Megan, you'd have taken everything, Dick's fortune, their future. I did what I had to. Jerry's shock gave way to clarity. Miss Marple's words, freedom, vengeance, fit perfectly. Maud had orchestrated it all, her love for her sons twisted into murder. "And Elsie?" he asked. "You framed her." Maud nodded, unrepentant. She was a threat, too close to Dick, too loyal to Megan. The letters pointed to her, kept you chasing shadows. Graves signalled the constable, who moved to restrain Maud. She stepped back, her hand slipping into her pocket, but Jerry was faster, grabbing her wrist. A vial clattered to the floor, cyanide gleaming in the lamplight. "No more," he said, his voice firm. "It's over." Maud's defiance crumbled, her shoulders sagging as the constable cuffed her. Elsie collapsed, sobbing, while Megan stared, her grief a tangible weight. Graves took charge, ordering Maud to the station, his face grim. "You've got a lot to answer for, Mrs. Simington. Burton, you're coming with me. Statements now." They left. Jerry glanced back at the cottage, its secrets finally laid bare. Maud's plan had been meticulous, her letters a masterstroke of deception, but her love had turned to poison. At Little Furze, he and Joanna sat late, the fire low, the case's weight settling around them. "She fooled us all," Joanna said, her voice soft. "Staged her death, killed Agnes, wrote those letters, all for her boys. It's monstrous, but I almost pity her." Jerry nodded, the scrap of paper still in his pocket. Miss Marple saw it. Motive beyond money. Maud's love was her motive and her downfall. I just hope Lymstock can heal now. The village slept, its wounds raw but exposed to the light. The poison pen was silenced, but its scars would linger, a reminder of the darkness beneath the surface of even the quaintest places. Chapter 12. Lymstock Restored. The morning sun bathed Lymstock in a gentle glow, its rays filtering through the budding elms and casting dappled shadows on the high street. The village, so recently a cauldron of suspicion and fear, seemed to exhale, its pulse slowing as the truth about Maud Simington's crimes settled into the collective consciousness. At Little Furze, Jerry Burton stood in the garden, his stick resting lightly against a bench, the crisp air filling his lungs. The weight of the past weeks, Mrs. Simington's staged suicide, Agnes Waddle's murder, the relentless poison. Pen letters lingered, but the clarity of resolution brought a tentative peace. Joanna joined him, her auburn hair catching the light, a shawl draped over her shoulders. "It's almost too quiet now," she remarked, her voice soft but tinged with relief. "After all that chaos, Lymstock feels like a different place. Do you think it'll ever be the same?" Jerry gazed across the lawn, where dew glistened on the grass. "Not the same, no. Villages like this, they carry their scars, but they heal in their way. Maud's confession closed the wound, even if it left a mark." He paused, his thoughts drifting to the dramatic confrontation at the Simington cottage, where Maud's icy composure had crumbled under the weight of her own words. Joanna nodded, her eyes distant. "I still can't believe it. She faked her. Death killed Agnes, wrote those letters, all to secure her boy's future. It's monstrous, but part of me understands her. A mother's love twisted into something awful." Jerry's jaw tightened. Love or not, she chose murder. Agnes was innocent and Megan's been shattered. That's not protection, it's destruction. His voice softened and he glanced at Joanna. "But it's over. Now we help pick up the pieces." The previous evening after Maud's arrest, Lymstock had buzzed with a mix of shock and catharsis. Inspector Graves had taken Maud to the station, her defiance giving way to a hollow resignation as she faced charges of murder, arson and fraud. The village grapevine, fueled by Mrs. Baker's breathless accounts, spread the news. The poison! Pen was silenced. Its author not a vengeful spinster or a scheming outsider, but a mother driven by a ruthless devotion. The letters, Graves confirmed, had been typed on the Women's Institute's machine, with traces of Maud's fingerprints found in the attic where she'd hidden, a makeshift lair of cheap paper and stolen ink. Jerry and Joanna had spent the night recounting the case to a stunned Mrs. Dane Calthrop at the vicarage, where Miss Marple listened with her usual quiet acuity. The elderly sleuth's role in unraveling the mystery had been subtle but pivotal, her insights guiding Jerry to the truth. "You did well, Mr. Burton," she'd said, her needles clicking softly. "You saw through the fog, as I knew you would. But beware. Human nature is never quite tamed. Lymstock will recover, but its shadows remain." Her words echoed as Jerry prepared to visit the Simington cottage, determined to check on Megan and Elsie. The village was stirring now, shopkeepers sweeping their doorsteps with renewed vigour, though their glances still held a trace of wariness. At the bakery, Mrs. Cleet offered Jerry a scone with a gruff nod, her earlier suspicions softened by the truth. "Never thought it'd be Mrs. Simington," she muttered. "All them letters, just to cover her tracks. Poor Megan left with that legacy." Jerry agreed, his heart heavy for the girl who'd lost a mother to both death and betrayal. At the cottage, Elsie Holland opened the door, her golden curls neatly pinned, but her face bore the strain of recent days. "Mr. Burton," she said, her voice steadier than he'd expected. "Come in. Megan's in the parlour, but she's fragile." The parlour was brighter than before, its curtains drawn back to let in the morning light, but an air of loss lingered. Megan sat by the window, a shawl around her shoulders, her eyes fixed on the garden. She looked up as Jerry entered, her expression a mix of grief and resolve. "You found the truth," she said softly. "I should thank you, but it hurts too much." Jerry sat across from her, his stick resting against his knee. "I'm sorry, Megan. I know it's no comfort, but you're free of her lies now. You can start again." Megan's lips trembled, but her voice held a new strength. "Free? Maybe. But she was my mother, even if she hated me. That letter, Father's letter, it was his way of saying he cared, wasn't it? And she stole it, like she stole everything else." Elsie, hovering nearby, spoke up, her tone gentle. "She didn't hate you, Megan. She was obsessed with the boys, with control. I see it now. I should have spoken up sooner, about her jealousy, her rages, but I was afraid." Jerry studied Elsie, noting the guilt in her eyes. "You were caught in her web, Elsie. We all were. That argument Agnes saw, it was about Dick Simington, wasn't it? Maud thought you were a threat, because he trusted you with his plans for Megan." Elsie nodded, her hands clasped tightly. "Yes. He told me, before he died, that he'd written to ensure Megan's share. Maud found out, and she never forgave me. She thought I'd encouraged him, but I only listened. When she died, or when I thought she did, I was terrified she'd left something to trap me. That's why I was so scared, Mr. Burton. I thought the letters were her revenge, even from the grave." Megan's eyes flashed, her voice sharp. "And you let me think you took that letter. Why didn't you tell me?" Elsie's face crumpled. "I didn't know about it, Megan, I swear. I was trying to protect you, to keep the house together. I failed you, and I'm sorry." Jerry intervened, his tone calm but firm. "It's done now. Maud used you both, used everyone to hide her crimes. The letters were her weapon, sowing distrust to cover her tracks. Megan, you've got a future ahead, and Elsie, you've got a chance to start fresh. Don't let Maud's shadow hold you back." Megan's gaze softened, though her pain was raw. "A future. I don't know what that looks like yet. But I want to try. For Father's sake, if not mine." Elsie reached for Megan's hand, a tentative gesture. "I'll help, if you'll let me. Not as a governess, but as a friend." Megan hesitated, then nodded, a small step toward reconciliation. Jerry left them, his heart lighter, but still burdened by the case's toll. As he walked back through the village, he reflected on Maud's meticulous plan. The stolen cyanide, the staged suicide, the attic hideout where she'd typed her venomous letters, each one a thread in a tapestry of deception. Agnes's murder, brutal and swift, had been her desperate bid to silence a witness, and the fire at the Women's Institute her final gambit to erase evidence. Yet it was her own hubris, her belief she could outwit the village, that had undone her. At the vicarage, Jerry found Miss Marple in the garden, tending to a bed of primroses, her straw hat shielding her from the sun. She looked up, her eyes twinkling with quiet satisfaction. "Mr. Burton, you've brought closure to Lymstock," she said, brushing dirt from her gloves. "A sad business, but the truth is a great healer." Jerry sat on a bench, the scrap of Dick's letter still in his pocket. "You saw it before I did," he said. "Maud's motive, her love for her sons, turned to murder. How did you know?" Miss Marple's smile was gentle but knowing. "Human nature, Mr. Burton, is much the same everywhere. In my village, I've seen love twist into cruelty, pride into destruction. Mrs. Simington was a woman of fierce will, and her devotion to her sons was her strength and her flaw. The letters were too deliberate, too widespread to be mere spite. They hid a single act, and her death was too convenient. When you found that scrap of paper, I knew it pointed to a family secret, and she was the only one with the cunning to orchestrate it all." Jerry nodded, her insight humbling. "What happens now? The village is free of her, but the wounds are deep, and Megan, she's got a long road ahead." Miss Marple set her trowel down, her voice soft. "Lymstock will mend, as villages do. Gossip will fade, and trust will return, though it takes time. Miss Megan is young, and resilience is youth's gift. She has you to thank for her freedom, and Miss Holland's support will help. But you're right, the shadows linger. People are capable of great good and great evil. It's well to remember that." Her words stayed with Jerry as he returned to Little Firs, where Joanna was packing for a trip to London, their rural retreat nearing its end. "We've done our bit," she said, folding a blouse. "Lymstock's on its way back, and I'm ready for some city noise. What about you, Jerry? Staying to play hero?" Jerry grinned, a warmth spreading through him. "No heroics, Joe, but I've been thinking about Megan. She's alone, and she's stronger than she knows. I want to help her find her feet. Maybe more than that." Joanna's eyes sparkled, catching his meaning. "Oh, Jerry, you're smitten! Well, she could do worse. Just don't propose in the middle of another murder case, all right?" Their laughter broke the morning's quiet, a sound of hope amidst the healing. That afternoon, Jerry visited Megan again, finding her in the cottage garden, pruning roses with a newfound purpose. "Mr. Burton," she said, her smile tentative, but genuine, "I was hoping you'd come. I've been thinking about Father, about what he wanted for me. I want to honour that, maybe study, make something of myself." Jerry's heart lifted, seeing the spark in her eyes. "You will, Megan, and you won't be alone. I'm staying in Lymstock a bit longer. Thought you might need a friend, or maybe more if you're willing." Megan's cheeks flushed, but her smile widened. "I'd like that, Jerry. A friend for now. Let's see where it goes." As they talked, the village came alive around them. Children laughed in the lane, shop bells chimed, and the church spire gleamed in the sun. Jerry thought of Miss Marple's warning about human nature's shadows, but in that moment Lymstock shone with possibility. The poison pen was stilled, its malice burned away by truth, and the future, though uncertain, held promise. Later, at the vicarage, Jerry bid farewell to Miss Marple, who was preparing to return to St. Mary Mead. She stood by her suitcase, her hat pinned neatly, her eyes warm with approval. "You've grown, Mr. Burton," she said. "Lymstock tested you, and you met the challenge. Keep your heart open, but your eyes sharp. Life has a way of surprising us." Jerry shook her hand, gratitude swelling. "I owe you, Miss Marple. Without you, we'd still be chasing shadows," chuckled, her voice light. "Nonsense. You'd have found the way. Now go build something with Miss Megan. She's a rare soul, and so are you." As her taxi rolled away, Jerry walked back to Little Firs, the village settling into a rhythm of renewal. Joanna, now reconciled with Owen Griffith after their strained moments, was planning a dinner to celebrate, her laughter echoing through the house. Jerry paused at the gate, looking out at Lymstock's rooftops, its wounds healing under the spring sky. The moving finger, as Miss Marple might say, had writ and moved on, leaving a village wiser, if not unscathed, and a man ready for a new chapter.